Hey guys, Chaos Shinobi here. This is a story where Naruto graduates a little earlier and has two teachers being Might Guy as well as Kakashi, with Naruto discovering he is a taijutsu prodigy. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. It is time for the weapon handling and taijutsu portion of the exam. Make your way to the targets outside and wait for my instructions. Naruto sighed deeply and raised his head from the table slowly, watching his nervous classmates start to file out of the classroom. It was better to wait until they had all left before he made a move. The last thing he needed today was to get shoved or tripped. He had to pass this exam. He couldn't afford any distractions. When the last person exited the room, he finally got to his feet and followed after them. He soon joined them in their loose lines in front of the targets. They were still whispering nervously to each other, and he rolled his eyes as they shot glares at him. They had never liked him. Not that anyone else in the village did either. Apparently having someone 3 years younger than them joining their class and actually doing better in some areas could be a blow to someone's confidence. They had spent the last 2 years trying to make him fail so he would get moved back down. It had gotten worse when their parents had joined in, but Naruto was stubborn. He wasn't about to let anyone get in the way of this. He will pass today and he will never have to deal with any of these morons again. Two particular morons started pointing to him, hateful looks twisting their faces, and Naruto raised an eyebrow back at them. Run and Kichuru were the worst of everyone, and no matter how many times Naruto beat them in taijutsu, they never left him alone. He secretly hoped they got on killed their first mission outside the village. That would solve a lot of his problems. Hideki-sensei tapped his clipboard to get their attention. You will each be given 5 kunai and 5 shuriken. The target in front of you has been divided into sections, so the closer to the center you hit, the more points you score. Your overall percentage will be added to the rest of your scores, so take this seriously. This could be the difference between you passing or not. Naruto clenched his fist tightly as the man's eyes swept over him at those last words. Hideki-sensei actually hadn't been that bad. There had been no active sabotage or intentional failings while Naruto had been his student, and there wasn't more he could ask for than that. He also didn't address the bullying or the stealing or the suicide baiting, but nobody ever did. Naruto knew better than to depend on an adult to help him anyway. He watched the rest of his classmates step up and launch their weapons at the target. Some did better than others, and he didn't bother to smother his grin as Rin fumbled a shuriken, missing the target entirely. Finally, it was his turn, and he walked up to face targets, trying to steady his breathing. Hideki marked off Kichuru's score on his sheet, keeping one eye on the rabble of children as he scanned their score. It was going to be a good batch this year. Daisuke was in line for Rookie of the Year, and Midori had already secured her spot as Kunoichi of the Year. Ren, Kichuru, and Kid were up there too, and Hideki would bet on seeing them in the Chunin exam sooner rather than later. His eyes fell to the final name on the list, and his eyes snapped to the tuft of blonde that stood slightly apart from the rest of his classmates. The boy appeared bored, a stark contrast to the excitable children around them. The QB container. Hideki knew better than to doubt the fuinjutsu of the late Yondaime, and Uzumaki had shown no signs of it while in his class. But Hideki couldn't help but try to stay away from him. There was only so much he could do as the boy's teacher, and while he knew he could have done worse, he also knew he could have done better. He just could not forget what lay within the body. The destruction that the beast left in its wake, that horrible night still replaying in a loop in his head. Every time he told the boy to wake up in class or stop eating or pay attention, that orange fox appeared in his head. The boy was favored by Hokage-sama, and Hideki had heard endless gossip about him, especially about his training habits. He wasn't really interested in his students' lives outside the classroom, but when he heard Uzumaki's name in conversation, he couldn't help but listen in. From what he'd gathered, all the boy did was train. Running, katas, weights, practice dummies. He was so tired and bored in his class that it was hard to imagine the blonde having enough energy to do all that every day. He was barely going to scrape by in his written exams as it was. The boy was the furthest thing from an academic, and Hideki doubted the boy even knew where the library was. Despite that, Hideki knew it wasn't from a lack of brains. The kid was clever when he wanted to be. His ninjutsu too. The boy wasn't lacking in chakra, quite the opposite. Hishinjanko were passable even if Hisbunshin wasn't. But he always got the feeling that Uzumaki didn't want to apply himself if he didn't have to. It wasn't the lack of ability with the boy. He just did not engage with the academy curriculum like he should. There were always 2 areas, though, that Hideki could count on the boy to outshine all the other students in. Uzumaki Naruto. Hideki eyed him as the final student stepped forward, grabbing his weapons. Hopefully his future Jounin-sensei would put him in something that couldn't be seen for miles. Most of it wasn't bad. Black shorts, blank sandals, black t-shirt, with each of the sleeves tied down with tattered white bandages. Then there was the bright orange sleeveless hoodie that the boy left zipped open. The boy had actually sewn on orange stripes onto the sides of his shorts to match. The orange clashed horrible with his mess of short blonde hair as it hung slightly over his sharp blue eyes. His gaze passed over the whisker-like scars on his cheek, but he abruptly looked away, setting his eyes on the target. Uzumaki twisted a kunai around his finger for a moment before he threw it, the other 4 following in quick succession. Hideki would always swear that the blonde's eye color flickered whenever he did that, but he knew it wasn't really possible. The container couldn't have a bloodline limit. He was a trick of the light. The kunai were removed and Uzumaki weighed up the shuriken, his eyes focused. Hideki saw the rock out of the corner of his eye, but he did nothing to stop it, watching as it was flung towards the container's face. He tried to convince himself it was good awareness training for him, but he couldn't help but feel a bit guilty. He knew that was only an excuse. He did make a note of the student who had thrown it. Kichiru was an excellent student, even with his slightly cruel tendencies. The small blonde snapped his hand back and deflected the rock with his shuriken, his gaze never wavering from the target. "I'd just like to finish the exam, Kichi team," Naruto said quietly. "You can try to beat me down later." Uzumaki twisted the shuriken in his hand one more time before he let loose, firing the next 4 one after the other. Hideki noted down his score, frowning at the boy's full marks. He had no idea how the boy managed it every time. Even with excessive training, any 9-year-old would still miss at least one. "We are now going to move on to the taijutsu portion of the exam. Make your way over to the taijutsu circle and do not enter it. You will be paired up randomly, and no, you may not change your partners. Remember, even if you lose, you still have a chance to get a decent score. But you should not be aiming to lose. Work hard, remember your training, and do your best. No weapons and no ninjutsu. That will result in an automatic fail for that portion. You will stop when I say so, not when you think so," he instructed, guiding the rabble over to the opposite side of the field. The next 2 hours were spent grading the students on their ability to beat each other up with their bare hands. It wasn't Hideki's favorite way to spend an afternoon, but some of the moves that they came up with were definitely worth a watch. His class fought dirty compared to others he'd had in the past. It wasn't a bad thing. There was no such thing as fighting dirty, only fighting to win. He was glad that they hadn't become stuck in the mentality of clean fights or honor, something that would get them killed once they graduated. He had to wince when Midori hooked her opponent by his nostrils, dragging him out of the ring. Excellent technique, as the nose was a vulnerable spot and could potentially restrict their breathing, but it was vicious. Overall, they had the Academy Taijutsu style down, with some variations from the clan kids. They all fought in similar ways that would soon branch out once they became genin. He looked down at his board and called the last pair up. Uzumaki Naruto and Ueda Kichiru. The 2 students stepped forward, already glaring hatefully at each other. They had some disagreements in the past, but Hideki could not show special treatment. They would just have to get over it. Uzumaki had to lift his head to stare down Kichiru, the 4 inches in height more obvious than ever. He was pretty sure Kichiru was a distant relation to the Akimichi, with his straight brown hair, stocky build, and plain green and brown clothing. Uzumaki, on the other hand, was already small for his age. There wasn't a lick of muscle on his frame, and Hideki was already mentally calling for the stretcher. He raised his arm and snapped it down, yelling, "Begin!" The boys did not bow and just fell into their taijutsu stances. Kichiru's was an excellent example of the academy style. Uzumaki's was not. It did not look anything like any taijutsu style that Hideki had observed during his time at the academy. The boy bounced lightly on his toes, his frame loose and relaxed. There was a moment of silence as the boys just looked at each other. The other children had gone quiet. Uzumaki's eyes flickered again, but Hideki determinedly did not think of what that could mean. He was not there to figure out his students' lives. He was there to teach them the coursework and make sure they didn't die their first week as a genin. That was all. Uzumaki glanced down at Kichiru's feet for a moment before he smirked, bringing out a small, foam ball from his pocket and starting to throw it from one hand to the other. Hideki narrowed his eyes but allowed it. It technically wasn't a weapon, but he would be watching very closely. This move by Uzumaki threw Kichiru off for a few seconds, but the older student shook it off, moving forward to throw a punch to Uzumaki's face. Hideki couldn't help but notice Kichiru's eyes kept darting down to Uzumaki's hand, his eyes following the movement of the ball. He knew that was unavoidable. They were taught to take note and be aware of anything moving in a fight. He was just not sure what Uzumaki was aiming to achieve with this. Hideki was about to mark Kichiro the winner, the blonde doing nothing to avoid a punch that would surely flatten him, when the unexpected happened. Kichiro's right ankle gave way and he dropped heavily to the floor. He barely had time to push himself up when Uzumaki kicked in right in the chest. Hideki's brush hovered over his clipboard as he watched Kichiro get shoved out of the ring. The large boy remained when he had landed, groaning dramatically as the kids around him stared. Uzumaki lowered his leg and looked at Hideki expectantly. Ueda Kichiro has been knocked out of the ring. Uzumaki Naruto wins. He motioned for the medic to attend to the still groaning boy. He had known that there would be medical assistance required, but he had thought of the wrong student. Really, he should have known. Naruto was nearly unbeatable in taijutsu. It was so easy to forget due to his size and attitude. He still wasn't sure how he'd manage to get Kichiro off balance using only a ball. As Uzumaki made his way out of the ring, Hideki leaned over. "You did not need to use a kick like that to finish the match. That was unnecessary violence against one of your future comrades," he admonished, taken aback slightly at the glare he received. "I won. That's all that matters," the boy replied shortly, walking in the direction of the classroom. Hideki sighed, motioning for the rest of the kids to follow him. He couldn't deny that Uzumaki was right. In their line of work, all that mattered was winning. It didn't particularly matter how. He followed behind his class, leaving the other teachers to finish up with the wounded students. "Congratulations to those whose names have been called. You have passed the final graduation exam and are now genin of Konoha. Come back to the classroom at 8 tomorrow morning to be assigned your teams. Those who have failed, come back in 2 weeks for the beginning of the new school year. You are dismissed," Hideki-sensei announced from the front of the classroom. Naruto stared down at the hitai-8 in his hands, running his fingers over the grooves in the metal. He abruptly shoved it into his pocket. As long as he had it on him as proof of his rank, he didn't need to wear it. He ignored the laughter and wails of his once fellow classmates, moving to the door. He did not want to hang around the academy any longer than he absolutely had to. "Uzumaki," he turned to the sound of his teacher's voice. "You are to report to Hokage-sama's office tomorrow, not here." He nodded once and continued his way out of the room, not bothering to speak to anyone else. He didn't have friends and he wasn't happy for any of them. He hoped he never had to see most of them ever again. Sure, he would be stuck with 2 as teammates, but that was only until the Chunin exams. He walked down the corridor, turning over Hideki-sensei's words in his head. Why would Gigi want to see him for team assignments? He weaved his way through the hordes of waiting parents, ignoring the glares and whispers directed his way. The occasional demon, Kyuubi brat, and monster floated over to him, but he brushed them away, shoving his hands deep into his pockets and gripping his headband tightly. It was hardly his fault that he got stuck with the giant demon fox that destroyed the village. It wasn't as if the yondaime stopped and asked for his consent to be discriminated against and tormented for the rest of his life. He had barely drawn his first breath when the Kyuubi attacked the village, and yet somehow, he was solely responsible for the ordeal. If he really was as bad as they all said he was, this village wouldn't be standing. Somehow he couldn't bring himself to be sad about that thought. Now he was genin though, it would be much easier to avoid people. He didn't have to be around other kids and he could avoid going into the village until absolutely necessary. They might even get missions outside the village. There was nothing that he wanted more. It was a good thing that Gigi gave him the option of graduating early. If he was stuck in that academy until he was 12, he might have started maiming people, starting with Kichi-team and Renbaka, but honestly he wasn't picky. Now he just had to hope that he would get a Jounin sensei that didn't care about his tenant. He wasn't expecting them to be nice or pay attention or anything, just the same neutral attitude that Hideki sensei treated him with. That was all he needed. Gigi would probably put him with a taijutsu specialist, and he hoped Gigi was aware enough to pick a good one. He needed to work on his bloodline limit, and improving his taijutsu was a good way to do that. No matter who he ended up with, he could just continue his solo training anyway. The real issue would be who his teammates were. He would actually be expected to work with them and be civil, and Naruto could not think of anything worse. He had ended up dead last in the class, so he would probably end up with Daisuke and Midori, the top in the class. They did not go out of their way to be horrible, but he would still be uncomfortable working with them. He could never trust them. The only reason he was even dead last were his academic scores. He just didn't see the point of learning useless stuff. Which dead man fought which dead man centuries ago would not help him survive a bandit attack. Shaking his head of those thoughts, he finally arrived at his destination. It wasn't quite time for the dinner rush, so it was pretty empty, which suited Naruto just fine. He walked up to the counter and hopped on one of the seats, grinning at the pair behind the counter. "Tuchijizan, I am Nichin. For miso ramen please." "Naruto-kun." Tuchi smiled right back at him. "How did it go?" Naruto dug out the hitai-8 from his pocket, dumping it on the counter. Tuchi laughed and ruffled his hair before going to start on his order. "I never doubted you." The owner of Ichiraku and his daughter were two of the three people that Naruto cared for in this village. Ever since Tuchi gave that free bowl of ramen to a starving orphan hiding from the rain, he had gained Naruto's everlasting loyalty. He had been coming back ever since. A girl of 12 stuck her hand out and Naruto gave her a high five before she started making her way to the back. "You showed them." I am Nichin called behind her. Tuchi placed the first bowl in front of him and Naruto took a moment to inhale the delicious scent. "I bet you blew them all out of the water, huh?" Tuchi said, turning to continue cooking. "My taijutsu saved my ass." Naruto dug into his meal. "Though I finally got that ankle break move to work and now I'm free of those bastards. I can finally work on making some real progress in my training." A flicker of sorrow crossed Tuchi's face for only a second, but Naruto caught it. He was far too used to seeing it. "Tuchijizan, I'm fine. I've made it this far without people my age and I don't need them. I can do everything myself." Tuchi handed him the second bowl, but Naruto twirled his chopsticks in his hands. It was an old argument between them. Tuchi was adamant that Naruto needed friends and needed to learn to work with other shinobi. Naruto was convinced he didn't need them, that he would be fine on his own. Neither would budge on the issue, and now that he'd graduated, he knew Tuchi was banking on his new teammates opening him up. Naruto knew better. He ate the next 3 bowls, an uncomfortable silence hanging over the ramen stand. He stood and brought out Gamachan, counting out the coins carefully. He flinched as a hand came towards him, but forced himself to relax as he realized it was Tuchi. The man retracted his hand, a troubled look on his face. "No need to pay," he forced a smile. "It's on the house. Consider it a gift for you passing the exam and making genin. I know it's something you've been wanting for a long time." Naruto forced a smile of his own, although it wasn't as hard as he thought it would be. He knew Tuchi cared and wanted the best for him. They just disagreed on what that best was. "Thanks, Tuchijizan." He shoved Gamachan and his headband back into his pocket and left the ramen stand, hand once again resting in his pockets as he walked the long way home. He weaved his way through the bustling streets of Konoha, pulling on his hoodie as he held an apple in his mouth. Barely avoiding a shouting villager, he ducked beneath 2 haggling women and took a bite, switching the apple to his hand. Naruto didn't like being in the village streets. He would have been more than happy to take every dark, isolated alleyway all the way to the tower. He couldn't wait for the moment he could take to the rooftops. As an academy student, he'd been heavily discouraged from that route. After the 5th ANBU found him, he'd taken the hint. Glaring back at an old woman who seemed particularly annoyed at him, he finally reached the tower. He ignored the Chunin guards as he started taking the steps 2 at a time. Perhaps he shouldn't have fallen asleep at the training grounds, but it was too late to change that now. Gigi should be used to him turning up late. He still had no idea why the old man wanted to see him. It had to have something to do with his team assignments, as the rest of his classmates were being assigned to theirs right at this moment. He finally reached the top of the stairs, making his way down the short corridor to the large double doors. Most who entered the Hokage's tower would stop and take a moment to admire the carefully crafted interior. It was certainly worthy of the wealth and power that Konoha had as the strongest hidden village. Naruto had been in and out of this place his whole life, so he was immune to the intimidation factor that the place conveyed onto outsiders. Since he was around so much, though, he was more perceptive to changes. A change such as the Chunin that worked in the tower actively avoiding the door of the Hokage's office. Some were annoyed, some were defeated, and some were scared. Naruto threw those ones a strange look. What could they possibly be scared of here? As he drew closer to the door, he thought he heard something, but as he reached for the handle, it was silent. He poked his head in and tried to find what was putting off the Chunin. The office looked the same as it always did. Scrolls adorning the walls, books stacked neatly on the shelves, the pile of paperwork threatening to topple off the Hokage's desk. His eyes were drawn to the Yandame's picture on the wall, but he shook it off. He switched his gaze to the Hokage himself, but his eyes snapped to the man's left. A man stood there in a tight green spandex bodysuit and woolen orange leg warmers, a bright red hitayate tied around his waist. He was the most colorful man Naruto had ever set eyes on. The academy teachers used to tell him off for wearing orange, but had they ever seen this man? He winced as he took in the man's shiny bowl cut and massive bushy eyebrows. Did he own a mirror? The tightness of the bodysuit did give Naruto a chance to scope out the insane expanse of muscle that lay beneath. His lack of self-awareness over his appearance apparently did not affect his ability as a shinobi. The man's dark eyes looked right back at him, probably doing the same assessment that Naruto had just done. "Should I wait outside, Gigi?" he announced himself. "No, Naruto-kun," Gigi smiled at him. "We were just waiting for you. Congratulations on passing the exams. With the highest taijutsu and weaponry scores, no less." Naruto grinned, fully stepping into the room and shoving his hands into his pockets as he stood in front of the desk. "No sweat, Gigi. It would take more than that to keep me down." "Now," said Gigi firmly, "I summoned you here because you will not be put into a three-man genin team like the rest of your classmates. Instead, you will operate as an apprentice, which is slightly different from your average genin." Naruto frowned in confusion as the Hokage continued. "This is Mato Gai, an elite jounin of Konoha and a master of taijutsu. He will be your master and teacher until you pass the Chunin exams." Before Naruto could say anything in reply, Gai bounced forward. "Greetings, my youthful pupil. I low dash. Volume Gaikuin. My most sincere apologies, Hokage-sama." Gai beamed, his voice only slightly quieter at the old man's words. "Naruto-kun, I look forward to training you, and I'm sure we will reach the pinnacle of our springtime of youth." Naruto blinked in the face of Gai's sparkling teeth and enthusiastic thumbs up. He redirected his incredulous gaze towards his grandfather figure. "What the actual fuck, Gigi? Gai is very energetic, but he is still the most qualified instructor available," the Hokage chuckled. "He will be able to aid you in both improving your weak points and in developing your bloodline limit." "Wait, so I just have to deal with him?" Naruto asked eagerly. "I don't have teammates?" "For now, no, you will not be placed on a team. You will complete D ranks on your own, but may work with other genin teams if Gaikuin wills it. You will be placed on teams for any C ranks you undertake in the future. There were an odd number of students graduating this year, and due to the rarity and specificity of your bloodline, it was decided that you need to focus on developing it and so would be the odd man out, as it were." Naruto nodded along to the Hokage's explanation, but he could not hide his delight at the news. Gigi frowned at him and Naruto tried to school his features in something more neutral. "You will have to work with other Konoha shinobi in the future, Naruto-kun," he stated firmly. "Now, go get your picture taken for your identification and registration, and then meet Gaikuin at Training Ground 17 in 2 hours." A grin fell easily onto Naruto's face as he raced out of the room, slamming the door closed behind him. "Well, his taijutsu and weapon handling are very impressive, Hokage-sama. If he could harness the incredible volume of chakra within him and apply it to his ninjutsu, he would be a most formidable shinobi in the future. His age, too, has not hindered him. Despite being 3 years younger than his peers, his work ethic and focus is up there with shinobi twice his age. I have no doubt that with some guidance that he will be able to fully embrace the springtime of his youth." "Go on. I know there is something else, Gaikuin. His mindset may pose a problem. He has not only been unable to connect to anyone his own age, but he seems like he actively ensures it. His happiness at the news that he would not be placed in a team is a red flag for a Konoha shinobi. He also does not engage in anything that does not interest him. He skated through the academy on almost the bare minimum on most subjects if he turned up at all. The issue is not his ability or his skills, but his attitude and dismissal of his fellow shinobi and villagers. Naruto-kun has not had it easy, but I believe you will be able to help him, Gaikuin." "Of course, Hokage-sama. I will aid Naruto-kun to the best of my ability in embracing the best days of his youth." "Dismissed, Gaikuin. Go and meet up with your new apprentice." Naruto scanned the empty training ground, trying to spot his new teacher. He didn't know if he'd ever manage to miss him. The man was loud in every sense of the word. Guy-sensei? Naruto Kyuan. He flinched and snapped his head round, coming face to face with the grinning visage of his new sensei. Naruto narrowed his eyes. He hadn't been there earlier. Surely a man with his volume wouldn't be any use for stealth. It is time to test your capabilities, Naruto-kun. Before Naruto could process the statement, Guy leapt forward with a punch aimed directly to his face. Only pure instinct allowed Naruto to duck, and he snapped out his own fist into Guy's stomach. The man easily dodged, and they engaged in a spar. Naruto activated his bloodline limit as a kick from Guy shoved him back. He rolled with the momentum to displace the force and sprung to his feet. He scanned the jounin and grinned. He could see every muscle, every breath, where Guy's center of gravity, where he placed his weight. Guy's elbow and bicep twitched and Naruto threw himself to the ground, avoiding Guy's grab and returning it with a sweep of his legs. Guy stepped over the sweep and aimed his own leg at Naruto's chest. He rolled to the side and rose to his feet, his forearm taking the next blow. He was taking much less hits, but as the seconds passed, it became obvious that Naruto's bloodline worked faster than his body could keep up with. Even as his brain supplied the information and told him exactly what was going to happen, Naruto's limbs would not cooperate. It was only made more frustrating by the fact he knew Guy was holding back. He could see it. Every time he blocked Guy's limbs with one of his own or had to take the blow he couldn't dodge, his anger grew. His fists swung wider, sweat poured into his eyes, and he grew more concerned with landing a blow than watching Guy's movements. As he swung his fist one more time, determined to wipe off that stupid grin from the man's face, he felt a sharp pain in his ribs. He blinked, and when he next opened his eyes, he was staring at the clear blue sky above. He blinked once more, unsure of what point in the fight that his bloodline limit had deactivated itself. His befuddled brain kept trying to make sense of what had just happened as he became keenly aware of his lack of oxygen. That was excellent, Naruto-kun, truly showing the fire of youth is burning brightly within you. Naruto ignored the voice as he desperately heaved air into his lungs, his head light and skin tingling. Every breath burned, and only now did he notice that his limbs had turned to jelly from exertion. How long had they fought? It hadn't felt that long. Guy's face appeared above him and Naruto felt his annoyance return. The man didn't even look winded. The obnoxious man looked as fresh and lively as when they had first met in the Hokage's office only hours ago. The man waved a water bottle at him and Naruto sighed, hauling himself upright and regretting the motion immediately. The water bottle was dumped in his lap and he just stared at it. He would drink it after his lungs stopped screaming. Your taijutsu is wonderful, Naruto-kun, closer to a chunin than a genin. Next you shall demonstrate the ninjutsu and jinjutsu, so I can get the full scope of your abilities. Naruto grunted, finally taking a swig of water. He didn't really want to do that. He didn't like ninjutsu and he hated jinjutsu. Do I have to? He groaned. It's just the basic academy stuff. Not anything I'm planning on using if I can help it. Guy's smile remained unchanged. Of course, you can never have too many tools in your pouch, Naruto-kun. You can incorporate any of the skills you have learned into your fighting style. Naruto just poured the rest of the water down his throat. This happy, loud attitude was going to grate after a while. He stood slowly, shaking out his limbs to help regain the feeling. He threw the bottle to one side and flipped through the hand seals, producing a puff of smoke. Naruto raised his own bushy eyebrow as he stared deadpan back at Guy, refusing to look down at the green spandex that now covered his body. His illusion disappeared in another puff of smoke as he switched with a log, letting it sit for a moment before swapping back. Happy? What about Bunshin? Or Genjutsu? I can't do Bunshin, Naruto shrugged. I only passed because they didn't choose it as one of the exam jutsu. Guy's broad smile finally dropped into a serious expression. Show me. Naruto rolled his eyes but made the appropriate hand seals. 2 puffs appeared beside him and he didn't need to look to know what would be there. His clones always turned out looking like they'd just been poisoned. At least they weren't missing any body parts this time. He allowed them to vanish as Guy raised a hand to his chin. And Genjutsu? I'm really good at breaking out of them, Naruto offered. Haven't met one I couldn't break out of yet. Can't cast one though, never been able to. Guy was silent for a moment, a thoughtful look on his face. Naruto began to stretch out his muscles. He had to take advantage of the calm where he could with this jounin. I will investigate that for you, Guy suddenly spoke up, his grin back in place. For now, we must address your weaknesses. Naruto flopped back onto the ground. You are excellent at taijutsu, but I know you can improve. The main issue is your body cannot keep up with your bloodline limit. I saw you trying to react, but your body did not cooperate. Naruto nodded along. He already knew that. Your mind works at a much greater speed that your body can keep up with, Guy continued. You cannot utilize the advantage that your bloodline limit grants you. Fortunately, this can easily be remedied by training. This is what Naruto wanted. He wanted some guidance on how to get stronger. His bloodline limit had so much potential, but he knew he couldn't make it work on his own. There was only so far he could go by watching other shinobi from afar and trying to recreate it on his own. He needed a real teacher, one that would take him seriously and could give him some structure. He needed to get stronger or he might never escape this village. Guy was certainly unconventional, but he might be the teacher Naruto needed. Guy watched his genin from beneath the shade, taking a rare moment to sit still and take things in. Naruto struggled with the box, his legs shaking as he dumped it heavily into the cart. The boy took a moment to breathe before he walked back to pick up another. They had gone to the mission assignment desk after their short training session to pick up Naruto's first D rank. There had been another genin team picking up their own D rank, and Guy had offered to let Naruto tag onto their team rather than tackle a mission on his own. The kid had vehemently denied it, snatching up the first scroll offered and stomping out of the room like he was afraid Guy wouldn't give him a choice on the matter. The mission had been one of the more heavy-going D ranks available. A merchant was sending his stock to another village in the Land of Fire and required his cart to be packed. Guy knew this task really required a full genin team, but he admired Naruto's burning determination to get it done himself. The springtime of youth had a chance to blossom beautifully within his young pupil, but the boy was so closed off. A part of him had hoped that Naruto would work with that team. He hoped that Naruto would realize that it's better to have a team to back you up, especially on missions. He should have known his apprentice would share the same desire to push himself to his limits that Guy had. It would be a slow process, fanning and building Naruto's will of fire, but he knew the boy had it in him. He had noticed that Naruto did not wear his Hitai 8. When he had asked the kid where it was, he had pulled it out of his pocket. He had tried to explain to the boy that he needed to wear it, proudly display it as a shinobi of Konoha, but Naruto had only asked if it was compulsory. Technically, it wasn't a rule that a shinobi should display it visibly. It was just something that was expected. Naruto had immediately shoved it back in his pocket, stating that he would have it on him as proof of his rank and that he didn't see the need to put it on his clothing. It was a bit concerning that Naruto had so little pride in his village, going so far as to dismiss what should be a proud display of allegiance completely, but Guy hoped he could show him that the village would have his back. It was going to be an uphill battle. Naruto heaved the last box onto the cart and turned to stare down Guy triumphantly. Another thing he had noticed with his new pupil: he was always ready to fight. Every time he had looked at Guy today, it was with a grumpy, challenging look that conveyed all the disdain he had for the world. The only time he had seen him smile and let his guard down was with Hokage-sama, and even then it was brief. Guy knew Hokage-sama was hoping that Guy could get him to relax a bit, to start letting people in. From what Guy had observed, that would be a more difficult challenge than the Sandaime expected. Guy grinned back brightly at his pupil, ignoring the obvious sigh and eye roll that emerged whenever he did so. It was only day one. He had time to break through Naruto's shell. He walked up to him, throwing him an earnest thumbs up before he met up with the client. He shook the man's hand vigorously, wishing him a wonderful day and thanking him for the opportunity. The client didn't return his enthusiasm, but that had never deterred Guy. He would always lead by example. He gestured for Naruto to follow him back towards the mission assignment desk to report in and collect their mission pay. The blonde trudged behind him, grumbling beneath his breath as they reached the village proper. Guy grinned brightly at anyone who looked their way, but their attention was taken by his pupil next to him. Naruto glared back at the villagers, and Guy's smile faltered as he watched the exchange. Naruto-kun, how is your chakra control? We did not have time to go over the exercises earlier. Naruto looked up at him, the glare fading into consideration. The distraction was working. Shit. Guy blinked. Your honesty is a shining example to all those who wish to pursue the epitome of their youth. Sure, Guy-sensei. The kid's answer did help to fit another piece of the puzzle to the picture Guy was building. This might be the root of his issues with Bunshin and Genjutsu. He would have to investigate it first before he suggested anything to his pupil, but he had a good feeling about it. Naruto was the first student that Guy had ever taken under his wing. He had been inspired by Kakashi to take a student. He couldn't let his rival pass on his wisdom alone. It hadn't been what he expected. Naruto hadn't been what he expected. But Guy was looking forward to what the future had in store. He already had so many youthful ideas about how Naruto-kun could improve, and his taijutsu was only the beginning. He was only 9, 2 years older than Guy himself had been when he graduated. He wasn't set in his ways. There was still time for Guy to show him that it was for his benefit that he positively engaged with the rest of the village. A team could be as close as family if he was just willing to let other people in. Guy would just have to do his utmost to help Naruto bring out the very best of his youth. Kakashi flipped a page in his book, walking idly down the village streets. The genin team Hokage-sama had shoved onto him had been disappointing. No teamwork or independent thought to be found. He had sent them straight back to the academy, and now he was free of that obligation for another year. Speaking of obligations, he could already hear the familiar footsteps bouncing in his direction. He briefly considered disappearing, unsure if he was up for Guy's antics today, but ultimately just stayed where he was. He hadn't actually seen Guy in a few weeks, a rarity when the older Jounin was not on a mission away from the village. My eternal rival. Kakashi flipped another page in his book, his eyes scanning the words he'd already read numerous times. Sorry? Did you say something? You're so hip, Kakashi. Tears streamed down Guy's face as he held up a fist in mock frustration. Kakashi finally looked up to see Guy pointing at him. I challenge you, Kakashi. We must see which of us can do the most one-handed push-ups. Kakashi turned that over in his head for a moment. Could he be bothered with that right now? He was physically capable, but did he really want to? Guy, can we not just see who can do the most blinks in a minute? His friend considered it before he grinned widely, his teeth sparkling. Of course, my eternal rival. What a unique challenge. Kakashi shoved his book into a pocket and turned his full attention to Guy. He stared into dark eyes as they waited. Go! Kakashi closed his eyes, opened them, and then rapidly repeated the process. As much as he liked to act like he didn't care about these challenges, he really did. It was just funny to watch Guy's reaction when he pretended otherwise. He would give each one his all when he did end up roped into them. He wasn't just going to let the older man win. Time. I achieved 157. Kakashi scowled beneath his mask. Maybe he should have agreed to the one-handed push-ups after all. 152, he reluctantly admitted. That is 27 to 28 then, Kakashi. Guy laughed. One more challenge and we will have tied. Kakashi whipped his book back out and put it pointedly in front of his face, resuming his walk. Guy fell in step next to him and began to talk at his usual volume. I am glad I was able to catch you, Kakashi. My new apprentice has taken up much of my time, but I did not want my fellow Jounin to think I had vanished. Trust me, Guy. Kakashi turned a page. No one would ever think you vanished. We can hear you coming a mile away. Guy let out a booming laugh, heavily patting Kakashi on the back. Kakashi caught himself as the force shoved him forward, and he shot Guy an annoyed look that the other Jounin did not register. A thought occurred to him. Wait. An apprentice? He lowered his book. Is that why we haven't seen you in the past couple of weeks? It is nice to know you missed me. Guy beamed. I could not let you tackle mentorship alone, so I put myself forward as a Jounin sensei this year. I did not get a full team, but the pupil I have is excellent and in the springtime of his youth. How is your team? Oh, I failed them on the first day. Kakashi waved a hand dismissively. Kakashi, was that really necessary? Guy's smile dimmed for the first time since they'd met up. I'm sure they weren't that bad. They really were that bad, he shrugged. The academy isn't like it used to be. Is yours actually good, or are you just being positive about him like you are with everything? Guy's grin returned in full force. Naruto-kun is indeed brilliant. His work ethic rivals my own, and his taijutsu is going to be the best in the village one day. He has my full and complete faith. The name registered and Kakashi stopped in the middle of the street. Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto, Guy confirmed. He graduated this year and was assigned to me. Huh, Kakashi frowned. I didn't know he was graduating this year. Not that he knew anything about Minato-sensei's son. To his shame, he had avoided the boy. He just didn't want to be reminded of his loss. He knew he was letting Minato-sensei down, but the more time that passed, the easier it was to ignore the dark pit of guilt that grew each year. He had appeased it slightly when the body was a baby by watching over him in ANBU, but he hadn't seen the kid since. A lot could happen in the 5 years. He glared weakly at Guy's look of pity. "You know, Kakashi," his friend said at a normal volume. "It's never too late to build a relationship with him. I know you were his ANBU guard when he was a toddler. You do care about him. Just leave it, Guy." Kakashi brought his book back up, eyes scanning the page but none of it sinking in. "It sounds like he's doing fine without me." "Kakashi." "Oh, who is that calling me?" Kakashi said, walking briskly away. "I'll see you later, Guy." He was grateful when the other jounin did not follow. Thoughts of Minato-sensei's son circled around his head, long-buried regrets surfacing and the guilt choking him. He needed to go to the memorial stone. Naruto gasped for breath as he lay spread-eagled in the grass. It had been almost 2 weeks since he'd been assigned to Guy, and every day, they had a taijutsu spar. He had gotten no closer to even winding the jounin than he had the first day. It always ended the same way. Naruto collapsed on the ground, staring at the sky and struggling to get enough oxygen into his lungs. He healed quickly, but he was forming new bruises quicker than they were able to disappear. One good thing about Guy, the man didn't know how to hold back. He was more than happy to throw Naruto around like a ragdoll, and he was delighted. He wouldn't get any stronger if the jounin took it easy on him. He was already a bit faster than he'd been when he sat the graduation exam. If he kept going like this, he might actually make Chunin in a couple years. On the other hand, while all the muscle training and taijutsu was great, Guy hadn't mentioned Naruto's bloodline limit once. He thought that when he finally got a jounin sensei, he would be able to make some real progress with it. He had figured some aspects of it out himself through trial and error, but he knew there was more to it. "Guy-sensei," he sat up slowly. "When are we going to work on my bloodline limit? It's been 2 weeks. Like we discussed before, Naruto-kun, we need to get your body up to speed before we can bring out its full potential." Guy grinned, hands on his hips as he stared down at him. "We've barely begun your training. There is much more work to be done." "I know I'm not there yet, but that could take months." Naruto frowned. "Surely I should be developing it at the same time. All we've done this week is spar and D-ranks." "Naruto-kun, you are only 9. Guy's smile faded. "Jumping straight into developing everything at once will not help you in the future. We need to develop your skills gradually, starting at the basics to give you a strong foundation. You need solid taijutsu to even begin utilizing your bloodline limit to its full potential." What Guy was saying did make sense. Naruto understood where the man was coming from. He had seen it in the very first spar. His body was nowhere close to keeping up with the information that his bloodline limit granted him. He just had this burning desire to improve. He had to get strong as quickly as possible. He had such expectations when imagining what kind of training he would be doing with his jounin sensei. Thinking about it had helped pass the time in his history lessons. This had been both everything he had wanted and nothing at all what he expected. He didn't think he ever could have predicted Guy, but even with the early starts and late finishes, there was still that itching feeling that he wasn't improving quickly enough. He had never had guidance before, especially with his bloodline limit. He just needed some direction, and he could continue with it on his own. He had read up on other dojutsu when he couldn't find anything about his own, and had tried exercises for the Sharingan and Byakugan. He knew that the library wouldn't have any of the good stuff. They were kept within the clan compounds, but it was a start. He didn't get very far on his own. That's why he needed Guy. "Yeah, but I don't think we should be ignoring it completely just because of that," Naruto pointed out. "It's all well and good working on my power and speed, but then I won't know how to incorporate my bloodline limit into my fighting style." Guy's face sank into a thoughtful expression, and he raised his hand to his chin, stroking it thoughtfully. "You raise an excellent point," Guy nodded. "I will look into it. It is called the Emperor's Eye, correct?" Something uncoiled in Naruto's gut as he accepted Guy's words. Guy was already more dependable than any other adult that Naruto had encountered in his life so far. He still held some reservations. He had been let down enough in his life, but Guy hadn't done anything to prove otherwise. It had only been 2 weeks, though. There was plenty of time for Guy to fuck him over. "Yeah." Naruto took a sip of his water. There isn't anything about it in the library or the archives. But Gigi knew someone who had the same one. That's what he called it. Guy threw him an odd look and Naruto sighed, more than familiar with it from his former teachers. Yes, I do go to the library, and no, it does not mean that I like reading or studying or any of that rubbish. I just go when I need pointers on my training or when something doesn't make sense. I still stand by the fact that the book stuff in the academy is useless out in the field. This answer seemed to satisfy Guy as the man threw him thumbs up. He liked doing hat way too much. Leave it with me, Naruto-kun, Guy announced back at full volume. I shall find the most youthful training exercises for you. Naruto just continued to drink his water. 2 weeks in, and the whole youth thing made no more sense than it had when Guy had first mentioned it. He'd learned to just roll with it. He was immune to much of Guy eccentricities through sheer exposure. Now, Naruto-kun, Guy clapped his hands together. Today we are going to work on your chakra control. Naruto sank back into the grass and groaned. He knew his chakra control sucked. The leaf exercise in the academy had been his worst enemy. He always ended up shooting the leaf far away from his forehead, which he had later figured out was due to him putting too much chakra into it. That knowledge hadn't helped him, he just couldn't get the right amount of chakra. It sometimes felt like he was trying to fill a teacup with a bathtub. That's not a very youthful approach to your training. Guy hovered over him. This will help you with your E-rank jutsu. You cannot complete out-of-village missions without them. Naruto blinked and snapped upright, bouncing to his feet. Guy had a point. The sooner he learnt these jutsu, the sooner he could leave the village. He hadn't managed to get a handle on any of them yet, but maybe chakra control would help. He was willing to put himself through anything if it meant escaping this hellhole, even just for a mission. Guy watched him in amusement. Naruto crossed his arms in response. Have you heard of the tree-walking exercise? Nope. Then observe Naruto-kun. Guy led him to the edge of the training ground and stopped in front of one of the trees. Naruto raised an eyebrow as Guy continued walking to the base, as if he was going to walk directly into the trunk. His eyes widened as Guy started to walk up the tree. How was he doing that? He was just walking up the tree as if gravity wasn't a thing. Guy walked along one of the thick branches and turned to face Naruto, upside down with his hands on his hips as he grinned down at him. You have to teach me how to do that, said Naruto breathlessly. Right now. This is the key to the rooftops. He wouldn't have to walk in the streets and suffer the ire of the villagers. He could just use the window of his ratty apartment as his new door. He would be able to go weeks without seeing a civilian. The ANBU wouldn't be able to stop him either. He could just shove his Hitai 8 in their face. That is what we are here to do, Guy bellowed down from his branch. He watched his teacher walk back down the trunk, a grin forming on his own face. Maybe chakra control wasn't that bad. Guy landed lightly in front of him. So in order to do this, you must channel chakra to the bottom of your feet and keep it up at a consistent level with each step. Too little and you will slide off, too much and you will destroy the bark beneath your feet. Do you understand? Naruto nodded eagerly. He bounced past Guy and faced the tree, channeling his chakra through his legs. He placed his right foot onto the tree and the wood immediately exploded, throwing him away from the trunk. He stumbled back, swearing loudly as Guy watched him intently from the side. He regained his footing and eyed the trunk, his smile dropping, so he would need even less. He pushed chakra to his feet, trying to make it the smallest amount he physically could. He placed his foot back on the tree and felt his foot sliding. He tried to gently increase the level of chakra, grinning as his foot stuck. He lifted his other foot, his weight supported off the ground for a brief second. He tried to channel chakra to his suspended foot while maintaining the level of the foot stuck to the tree, but he lost control. The wood beneath his foot shattered and he was thrown to the ground, landing on his ass. It will take time to master this, Guy spoke up. It will be especially hard for you, but I have faith in your abilities. Why is it hard for me? Naruto scowled. Is it 'cause I'm dead last? Or am I less capable than normal kids? The lines on Guy's face deepened as his brow furrowed. Of course not, Naruto-kun, he said sincerely. You have more chakra than the average genin. It's why you struggled with Bunshin and the other E-rank jutsu. You just put too much chakra into the technique. This will make you more aware of your chakra supply and how much you are using. Naruto was taken aback. He hadn't been expecting that answer. He was so used to people putting him down for the QB or his grades or his financial situation. The thought that Guy wasn't trying to be negative hadn't even crossed his mind. His answer also made a lot of sense. He hadn't realized that he was using so much chakra. It didn't feel like too much to him. Oh! Guy's face softened. It's okay, Naruto-kun. We can just keep trying until you get it. I will be right here with you. Naruto resisted the urge to smile back at the jounin. He turned back to the tree, conflicting thoughts crowding his head. He wanted to believe Guy, but deep down, he knew the only person he could really count on was himself. Guy followed Naruto through the streets, the evening sun casting a warmth over the village and bathing each surface with a soft orange glow. Guy really did love Konoha, and he had never doubted anything he did in service. He would live and die for this village. The more he trained Naruto and got to know his student, the more questions he had. There were so many red flags popping up around the boy, and Guy did not like it. That comment he made about being less. He had automatically jumped to the defensive, had expected to be put down and disregarded. What kind of schooling did he receive to think like that? There was also the surprise that appeared on his face every time Guy encouraged him to learn and expand on things that were not immediately useful. Naruto could be very intense in his training, pushing himself like his very life depended on it. Other times, like when he mentioned ninjutsu or genjutsu, Naruto rolled his eyes and didn't even try to pretend he was interested. It was as if the genin thought that he was alone, thinking Guy was only there temporarily, so he had to fit the pieces together by himself. Guy looked forward to showing his student that he was there for him. He was there to help him reach his potential and flourish in the springtime of his youth. There was a burning passion beneath the surface, and Guy wanted to help Naruto realize it was okay to embrace it. He caught a few villagers looking their way, and he beamed cheerfully at them in greeting. But they weren't looking at him. Their eyes were latched onto the small blonde boy just in front of him, and Guy was surprised at the venom. People who usually smiled when he saw them were twisted up in hatred, their faces almost unrecognizable. He shot a glance at Naruto and found a matching glare as he gave as good as he got. Guy had always overheard talk of Naruto. It was hard not to in a village like this. He hadn't really taken it seriously. He didn't agree with the negative comments, and he was not about to think the worst of a boy he had never met. Now he had gotten to know Naruto, he was even less inclined to agree. His student was a hard worker, and while he was on the grumpy side, his youth and passion was clear for anyone to see. He hadn't stopped to consider what kind of effect those comments would have on the kid himself. Naruto tore his gaze away from the villagers as he spotted their destination in the distance. A smile almost broke across the genin's face as he picked up the pace, almost skipping to the ramen stand. Guy followed, taking a seat next to his pupil and smiling at the ramen stand owner. Naruto, the man grinned. Who do you have with you today? Guy hid his surprise as Naruto smiled openly, his blue eyes sparkling. This is Guy-sensei, he easily replied. He's treating me to ramen today. The ramen chef turned to Guy in mock sympathy. I hope you have a deep pocket, Guy-san, he said. This kid can really pack it away. I'm pretty sure his blood is part ramen broth at this point. Guy beamed at the chef as Naruto threw out an embarrassed Tsuchijizan. This was the most animated Naruto had been in the 2 weeks they had been training together. It was a nice change to see his student smiling rather than sporting the usual scowl he wore while completing missions. What would you like, Guy-san? Tsuchi turned to start cooking. Naruto always gets miso ramen, so I just need your order. Vegetable ramen, please, Tsuchi-san. Tsuchi nodded to them and focused on what he was doing. Guy glanced over at Naruto and decided to ask a question that had been on his mind since he learned that Naruto did not wear his hitayate. Naruto-kun, why do you want to be a shinobi? Naruto's smile fell and his brow furrowed. I owe it to Gigi. He helped me when I was younger and I want to repay him. I want to get to the point where I don't have to debate whether I can afford an apple. I want to master my bloodline limit. I don't want it to go to waste. Guy listened quietly. There was something else. Naruto kept throwing nervous glances at him, so Guy kept his body relaxed, trying to project acceptance and patience. It wasn't often that he tried to be quiet and tone himself down, but this felt important. He wanted Naruto to know he could trust him. I want to leave the village, Naruto admitted quietly. I want to get to the level where I can just leave and not get hunted down for it. The Sannin can do whatever they want. If I can get strong enough, I can do it too. Naruto stared down at his hands, twisting his fingers together. Guy could understand his nervousness. Shinobi generally did not have that goal. Guy himself could not imagine ever leaving Konoha except for missions. It was his home. It was where his heart and soul lived. For someone to say they wished to leave without the intent to return, it bordered on treason. He already knew that Naruto held no loyalty towards Konoha. That was obvious within the first hour of meeting him, but he could understand why. That's an admirable goal, Naruto-kun, to aim for that level of strength. Guy patted his shoulder gently. I will support you however I can. As Naruto snapped round to stare at him, his blue eyes wide in shock, Guy grinned at him. He meant what he said. Guy would help Naruto reach the epitome of his youth and accomplish all his goals. That was what he was here to do as a Jounin sensei. He hoped Naruto would change his mind, that by the time he reached the level of the Sannin he would find a reason to stay. Naruto walked out of the administration building, finished for the day after a gardening D-rank. He may have been done with Guy for the day, but he had every intention of going straight to the training grounds. In the month since he was shown the tree-walking exercise, he had only made it halfway up the trunk. Guy had been nothing but accepting and encouraging, but it was really starting to annoy Naruto. He would get to the top of that tree if it killed him. Guy had really surprised him. He had taken a chance telling the Jounin the real reason he became a shinobi. He knew that it was practically treason. The only thing worse was leaving and becoming a missing nin. Naruto had considered that when he was younger, but he knew it was wishful thinking. They would never let him go. The hunter nin would find him within a day, and then he'd be even more restricted. By conforming to the system, he at least would be able to leave on missions. He would take anything at this point. His sensei had just accepted it like it was no big deal. Beneath the spandex and youth, Guy was a lot more thoughtful than he let on. It was so easy to be fooled into thinking he was just a cheerful, loud, obnoxious character who yells about youth and challenges himself all the time. Guy was all of those things, but there was a brain beneath that bowl cut. Well, if it isn't the dead last. Haven't been sent back to the academy yet. Naruto closed his eyes, heaving a deep sigh. 6 weeks, 6 glorious weeks of avoiding his former classmates. He hadn't seen a single genin from his class, and it had been fantastic. There had almost been a weight lifted. He could through his day without being insulted and put down. The villagers threw him dirty looks, but at least they kept to themselves. He opened his eyes and turned to face them, folding his arms. Kichi team, don't tell me you passed, he goaded. Don't you need brains to be a genin? Or did they just pass you to use as a grunt? They didn't even waste a team on you, scoffed Rin. They must not think you're going to last that long. Or maybe they knew that anyone from the academy would only hold me back, Naruto smirked. He always enjoyed that shade of purple on Kichi team's face. Midori hung back a few steps from the two boys. She had never given him trouble, but she also ignored him completely. She refused to look at him even now. He wondered how she was managing on a team with those two terrors. She was probably getting what she deserved. Please, like anyone could stand to be around a demon, Rin jeered. If I really was a demon, Naruto rolled his eyes. Do you think you would still be breathing? His grin was all teeth as he watched a flicker of fear pass over their faces. You can't touch us, Rin swallowed, failing to put on a brave face. You're just talking shit. You can't do anything here. Naruto shrugged. True, he agreed casually. I can't touch a hair on your heads while we're in the village. On a mission, though, those enemy shinobi are tricky. You make one mistake and you're dead before you even realize what happened. He watched the dawning realization on their faces and he turned, waving a hand before shoving them into his pockets. He stopped as Kichiru called out behind him. You talk a big game dead last, but you're the one no one will miss when you are killed on your first mission. Your own parents killed themselves just so they could get away from you. The words struck his heart with the force of a kunai. The anger washed over him, leaving a hollow feeling in his gut. He whipped around in fury, watching them laugh as they walked into the Hokage's tower. That had always been the worst insult they could throw at him. They had done it once before in the academy and Naruto had almost maimed one of them. After narrowly escaping expulsion, they had made the same comment. They knew he couldn't attack them again. He couldn't risk getting thrown out of the academy, so he responded with pranks. While frowned upon, there was no serious punishment for those. After the third shaved head, the class had learned not to bring up his parents. It seemed that they thought they were safe since they weren't in the academy anymore. Naruto turned back around, his steps fueled with hatred and fury, as he began to think up ideas for revenge. They thought they were safe now. He would just have to remind them exactly who they were dealing with. Guy scanned the mostly empty Jounin standby station. He finally spotted the man he'd been looking for, sitting by one of the windows and slumping into the red sofa. Kakashi had been avoiding him since he found out Naruto was Guy's apprentice and Guy had given him his space. He knew how hard Kakashi took the loss of his team, and he had all but vanished into ANBU when Yandame-sama died. It had taken almost a decade to get him back, and he knew that was only because the Sandame hadn't given him a choice. However, he'd given his friend enough time to wallow. His rival needed to pick himself back up and face things head-on. Guy had just the thing to help him do that. My eternal rival. He made it a point to ignore the way Kakashi shrunk into himself at the sound of his voice. His rival was simply having a bad day. I am glad to have found you, he grinned. I have a favor I need to ask of you. Kakashi lowered his book slightly as he stared deadpan back at Guy. To the outside observer, Kakashi looked as relaxed and unaffected as he always did. Guy knew better. Kakashi obviously hadn't been sleeping. The lines of his frame were tense and he knew there was a deep frown hidden beneath that mask. Hopefully Guy's proposition would help him out of his own head. Guy, said Kakashi with a flat voice, I'm kinda busy right now. Can I take a rain check? Kakashi, you need to engage with life. Reach the springtime of your youth. You cannot hide in your book forever. Watch me, Kakashi mumbled under his breath. I need your help with my young pupil, Guy continued. He wishes to work on his dojutsu, and with your experience with the Sharingan, I know you would be the perfect mentor to help him to achieve the prime of his youth. Kakashi dropped the book into his lap, leaning forward to actively stare at Guy. He inherited the Emperor's Eye? Indeed, although I was not aware it was named as such. Yandame-sama kept it close to his chest. Most of Konoha do not know he even had a bloodline limit. Does Naruto know? He does not speak of his personal life, but he is smart. I do not doubt that he has figured it out. Kakashi slumped back in his seat. Shit. Kakashi, you are the best person in the village to help him harness it, Guy insisted. You have your own experience and skill with your own bloodline limit, and you saw the Emperor's Eye up close when you trained under the Yandame. He could feel his rival wavering and he grinned. This would be a fantastic partnership not only for the genin, but Kakashi too. Before the other Jounin could answer, a voice called out from behind them. Guy! He turned to see one of the other Jounin sensei approaching, his expression thunderous as he stomped over to them. You need to tighten your leash on the Kyuubi brat. Guy's grin fell. I am not sure what you mean, Hayama. I do not have Naruto on a leash. Obviously, Hayama scoffed. You fucking need one. That brat needs some sort of fucking discipline, and if you don't give it to him, someone else will. The threat registered and Guy narrowed his eyes, his usual cheerful demeanor absent. Naruto is my apprentice, Hayama, and he is my responsibility. He does not deserve this kind of treatment, and I assure you, if you place a finger on him, I will take my own decisive action. Shirakumo Hayama was an excellent Jounin and Guy had worked well with him in the past. The man was usually calm and collected. He was the one who carefully assessed the situations on missions and decided on the appropriate course of action. He had never seen the man lose his temper like this. His gray hair was falling out of his high ponytail and his uniform was rumpled. What did Naruto do? Kakashi spoke up, breaking their impromptu staring contest. He traumatized my genin is what he did. Hayama threw up his arms in frustration. Midori won't leave her house and Ren and Kichiro won't talk to me. They won't talk to anyone. How do you know Naruto was responsible? Someone mentioned his name around Kichiro and the kid flinched so hard he fell off his bed. I did the same with the other two and they had the same reaction. That isn't a coincidence. Do you know what he did? Guy asked quietly. I think it was some sort of prank gone wrong. Hayama ran a hand through his hair, loosening his ponytail further. Naruto did plenty of them while he was in the academy, but he's a genin now. It's unacceptable, Guy. What did they do to him? They both turned to Kakashi as he rose to his feet. I don't know, Hayama sighed. They really don't like him, but I can't imagine them doing anything to warrant this level of retaliation. This is my first team, and now I have to spend the next few days picking up the pieces. Guy considered his words. There was something missing. Naruto would not do anything like this unless he was provoked. The kid kept to himself. He hated speaking to other people. Guy had witnessed the genin go to extreme lengths to avoid any sort of conversation. If these kids already had a history, then whatever happened must be worse than Hayama was imagining. He knew Naruto was better than this. Hayama also had a point. This kind of behavior may have been tolerable at the academy, where they could assign extra work or detentions, but Naruto was legally an adult. The moment he had been handed that headband, he was judged by the same standard that all Konoha shinobi were. He could not prank other shinobi out of revenge or malice. There were other ways of resolving conflict. "I will speak to Naruto," Guy said gravely, earning twin looks of surprise from his colleagues. "I will ensure this does not happen again." Hayama nodded, the anger leaving his frame and weariness replacing it. "You also need to speak to your own students," Guy continued. "Naruto would not do this unprovoked. They did or said something that I am sure was just as unprofessional. My student is not the only one at fault." Hayama rested his hands on his hips as he tilted his head back, taking a deep breath and releasing it slowly. "I know," he admitted. "I'm not naive enough to think that they're innocent. I'll speak to them." He shot them a weak grin and turned, waving goodbye as he exited the building. Guy turned over the conversation in his head, trying to think of the best way to approach this. He had only had his student for 2 months. There was still a lot of work to do in bringing him to the full bloom of his youth. This might set them back. "I'll do it." He glanced over at Kakashi, the man's eye still fixed on where Hayama had left. "I'll teach him." Guy clasped Kakashi on the shoulder in thanks, before he began walking to the exit himself. The joy from his rival accepting his proposition warred with the concern and sadness that resulted from his talk with Hayama. He needed to find Naruto. Naruto punched the wooden target, following it up with a kick and another punch. Sweat ran down his back as he continued the pattern, the dull ache in his fists beginning to travel up his forearms. He'd been at it for 3 hours now and his mind had zoned out. This was his favorite training exercise. Just him and a wooden training post going through the same movements over and over again. He loved the freedom of it, as all other thoughts emptied from his mind. He could forget the village and the anger and frustration that came with it. The warmth of his muscles and the stretch and strain from the katas kept his mind from wandering completely, so he felt like he was floating. He threw a particularly hard punch, smiling as the pain thrummed up his arm. "Naruto-kun." He swung a wide kick into the side of the post, hoping they would go away. "Naruto." He threw one final punch, feeling the sharp pain through his fingers as he stepped back from the post. He turned to look at Guy, his chest heaving and the sweat dripping into his eyes. "What, Guy-sensei?" Guy was uncharacteristically grim, his bright smile missing and his exuberant energy subdued. His thick brows were furrowed into a frown and his arms were crossed. "We must discuss your recent actions towards Team 5. Naruto racked his brains. Who were Team 5? He hadn't been present at the team assignments and he hadn't bothered to find out after. "The team under Shirakumo Hayama," Guy elaborated. Naruto hoped his blank expression would clue his sensei in. He had no idea who these people were. Guy was unimpressed. "Midori, Kichiro, and Rin." Clicked. "So they're Team 5? He said. "I had no idea. It wasn't as if I was there when the teams were assigned." Guy sighed deeply and Naruto eyed him strangely. It was weird dealing with a guy that wasn't smiling and bouncing around and yelling about youth at the top of his lungs. He had found the whole charade annoying until now. Maybe the enthusiasm was better than the stone-faced jounin he was faced with now. "Naruto-kun, you cannot prank your fellow shinobi. I understand it was something you engaged in during your time at the academy, but you are a genin now. It is not youthful to treat your fellow shinobi this way." "Who said I pranked them?" Naruto asked, feigning surprise. Guy just looked at him and Naruto gave up the innocent act, grumbling about snitches beneath his breath. He should have known one of those cowards would go crawling to one of the adults. "I was just letting off some steam, Guy-sensei. I didn't do any harm. Midori will not leave her home and the boys are similarly traumatized." "Then maybe they shouldn't be shinobi?" Naruto shot back, frustrated. Guy uncrossed his arms. "What did you do, Naruto-kun?" "I just surprised them," Naruto retorted defensively. They were in one of the forests for some team training exercise and their jounin wasn't around, so I ambushed them hinged as Iwa Nin. Guy looked at him for a long moment, one of his bushy brows raised. Naruto huffed, expanding on his explanation. I hinged myself and a few clones and dropped on them from above. I let off a few explosion tags and stuff, but I didn't actually hurt them. It's nothing that they wouldn't face on a real mission. Guy remained silent and Naruto kept talking, trying to fill the empty air that his sensei would normally fill. It was unsettling. Naruto knew he would not normally spill so much information, but Guy's silent treatment was more effective than he would have thought. For some reason, the thought of Guy being disappointed in him sat heavily in his gut. He would take the angry yelling of the rest of his teachers any day. Okay, so maybe I threatened to torture and kill them, and one of my clones was hinged as their sensei and was disemboweled and stuff. You said you did not know who Hayama was. I didn't know his name, Naruto huffed. I just knew what he looked like. I saw him running them through katas last week. And the clones, Guy said. I spent the last 2 weeks learning Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu. Specifically for this prank? Naruto was the silent one now. He didn't think admitting that he snuck into the Chunin section of the library and stole a scroll to learn a clone technique only for the purpose of a prank would go down well. He also decided not to mention the red food dye he had added to the water that made up his clones. It had worked surprisingly well as blood. Guy let out a heavy sigh, the stone facade finally breaking into exasperation. Naruto-kun, while it is impressive that you taught yourself a clone jutsu, you cannot do this again. If you have grievances to bring against your fellow shinobi, you must follow the proper procedures. Raise it with me and I will handle it, escalating it if need be. Okay. Naruto raised his hands in surrender. I'll do that next time. It's not as if I knew I could do that. Guy's frown returned. As far as I am aware, they have this system in place at the academy. Yeah, but not for me, Naruto shrugged, looking away. No one would do anything if people picked on me or wrecked my stuff, so I had to create a deterrent. After the 5th kid ended up with nails in their chair, they started to leave me alone. I'm the QB brat. The rules have never applied to me. Guy nodded, his expression softening. I promise on the springtime of youth, Naruto-kun, that I will not be like your former instructors. I will be here for you and I will support you. I only ask for your trust. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the jounin. Guy had been better than any of his other teachers combined, and it had only been 2 months. He was also the most genuine person Naruto had ever met. Once you got past the spandex in youth, Guy was reliable and kind. Okay, he nodded slowly. I'll trust you. Something loosened in Naruto's gut as Guy's smile returned, his teeth shining and his demeanor brightening. The man began to talk loudly about his water clones, and Naruto relaxed as things went back to normal. Maybe adding one more person to his small circle of precious people wouldn't be so bad. Kakashi loitered at the edge of the training ground, watching Minato-sensei's son scream expletives at a scuffed and damaged tree. He may have inherited Minato-sensei's bloodline limit, but that temper was all Kushina. He was trying to do the tree-walking exercise, and he appeared close to reaching the top. My eternal rival. Guy bounced up behind him, throwing an arm around Kakashi's shoulders. I am so happy you could come. You asked me to be here, Kakashi replied quietly, still watching the genin. He has far too much chakra for his age, Guy answered his unspoken question, his volume lowered. He has been attempting this exercise for 2 months. Kakashi looked at him in surprise. 2 months? Really? He had no chakra control at all when he was first apprenticed to me. Guy removed his arm from Kakashi's shoulders. He has no interest in ninjutsu or genjutsu. That said, he learned the water clone technique in less than 2 weeks. Kakashi was going to ask about that, but Guy shoved him forward without warning. Naruto-kun. The blonde turned to them, blue eyes narrowed and face like thunder. It is time to train your bloodline limit. Like the flick of a switch, the anger vanished and he grinned brightly. Kakashi's heart hurt at the sight. He was too much like his parents. Finally, he ran over to meet them. Is this a new teacher or something? Kakashi is one of the finest jounin in the village. Guy laughed. He is my eternal rival. He also has a dojutsu, so he is well equipped to aid you in developing yours. Naruto looked at him with no recognition in his gaze. Kakashi hid his wince and waved a hand half-heartedly. Yo! Naruto looked at him for a long moment before he turned back to Guy. Are you sure? Guy laughed. Of course, Naruto-kun. There is no one I trust more with your dojutsu training. Naruto shrugged. If you say so, Guy-sensei. Kakashi shook off his thoughts, switching into his professional persona. It might make it easier to deal with Minato-sensei's son. Why don't you tell me what you have figured out? It's all observational as far as I can tell, Naruto began to list. It's great for dodging, keeping track of projectiles, covering blind spots, reading taijutsu moves and people's body language. I can see the smallest movements in muscles, breathing and expressions, so I know when people are lying. My taijutsu is good. I can see moves before they've been made and feints don't work on me. Kakashi considered the genin's words. That lined up with what Minato-sensei could do. It was one of the reasons he was capable of the Hiraishin. Most could not keep up with the processing speed and reaction times of the technique. Minato-sensei's bloodline limit eliminated the difficulties and drawbacks of the technique. So it's mainly taijutsu-orientated, Kakashi mused, pretending that he had no knowledge of the Emperor's eye. No chakra involved. Pretty much, Naruto shrugged. It's basically a shitter, taijutsu-based version of the Sharingan. It has some similarities to the Byakugan too as far as the field of vision is concerned. Kakashi frowned. While it did seem like a lesser version of the Sharingan, there was a lot more to the Emperor's eye. He had seen Minato-sensei use it to its full potential, and it was an incredible weapon. He hadn't ever seen Minato-sensei taken by surprise or successfully fooled. It always seemed like he was seeing something no one else could. Not even Kakashi with Obito's Sharingan. That was without taking into account the zone component of the bloodline limit. It seems like there is more to it, Kakashi started. It also sounds like the stronger the user, the more you will be able to bring out the full strengths of the bloodline limit. Have you tried copying taijutsu moves yet? What, like the Sharingan? Essentially yes, but you need to stop comparing your dojutsu to the Sharingan. While similar, they are not the same. The Sharingan is capable of a lot. Yes, but there are things that only the Emperor's eye can do. How do you know what it's called? Naruto asked suspiciously. I didn't tell you and Guy wouldn't have told you. I asked him not to tell anyone. Guy let it slip when he asked for my help. Kakashi lied quickly, before he cursed at the sight of Naruto's eye flashing silver. Sure. Naruto deadpanned. So what are we doing now? Kakashi let out a breath as Naruto appeared to let the lie go. He definitely caught it. He should probably expect an interrogation sometime in the future. For now, copy Guy's katas as closely as you can. We'll start there. Naruto watched the Genin team's file out of the village from his vantage point on a nearby rooftop. The Chunin exams were being held in Kusagakure this year, and he had been asking Guy all week to take him. His sensei had refused. He had only been a Genin for 6 months, and he was nowhere near ready for something like the Chunin exams. He also had to complete at least one C-rank mission, and Guy had given no indication that he would be taking Naruto on one anytime soon. The only reason Naruto had let it go was because nobody else from his graduating class was allowed to go either. There was also something about only being allowed to compete in teams, but Naruto was ignoring that bit for now. He would cross that bridge when he came to it. As the last team left through the village gates, Naruto stood and stretched out his limbs. He turned and began to bounce across the rooftops, making his way towards his usual training ground. The village was only beginning to wake up and the streets were deserted, but Naruto didn't want to take any chances. Since he had mastered the tree-walking technique 2 months ago, he hadn't stepped a foot into the village proper. The closest he got was these rooftops. He sent a water clone to get his groceries while he waited close by. He had learnt the hard way that the water clones couldn't stray too far away from his real body. He leapt down and broke the fall with a roll, walking away from the buildings and into the trees. Guy liked to start training at 5 in the morning. It had taken some getting used to, but Naruto loved training. He would get stronger even faster this way. They had settled into a consistent training schedule. Physical conditioning first thing, moving on to chakra control and weapon handling before lunchtime. After lunch, it was D ranks, usually 1 or 2. Dinner and taijutsu training followed, and while Guy let him go at 6, Naruto always stayed much longer, stumbling into bed around 10. Kakashi sometimes joined them, running him through drills designed to improve his ability to wield the Emperor's eye. It was hard. If it wasn't for the advanced healing he got from the Kyuubi, he was sure he wouldn't be coping as well as he was. As it was, there was always some part of him that hurt. Guy went all in for every aspect of his training. It was what Naruto wanted, but sometimes he wished that his face wasn't being shoved into the ground daily. Even with the small progress he'd made with his bloodline limit, he couldn't put a scratch on the jounin. The man was now talking about adding weights, and Naruto's limbs already felt heavy at the thought. He broke through the tree line to see Guy already in the middle of push-ups. Naruto-kun, his sensei jumped to his feet. We are going to do something different today. Follow me. Naruto picked up the pace as the jounin ran out of the training ground. The last time Guy had said that, Naruto had ended up walking around the edge of the village on his hands. His arms were jelly even into the next day. He had no doubt he would be grateful for the training, but in the moment Naruto just wanted death to take him there and then. He was driven, not insane. He hurried after Guy, following the bright green back until they reached the base of the Hokage mountain. He took a moment to stare up at the yondaime. He didn't really feel anything particularly positive about his father. He'd figured out that he got his bloodline limit from the man, but he had also stuck him with the Kyuubi. He had no doubt that it had been the only choice at the time, but Naruto was the one who had to live with the consequences. His father wasn't the one condemned and scorned by the village. He was dead and free of any repercussions from his decisions. Guy turned to him, placing his hands on his hips proudly. Today we are going to climb the Hokage mountain. Naruto stared at him before switching his gaze to the vertical cliff face. He looked back down at Guy incredulously, and the jounin continued. Since it is your first time, you may use all 4 of your limbs. He announced like that it was some kind of great help to him. I will only be using one hand. We will do this once a month until you are about to climb this with only one of your limbs. Do not use your chakra to grip the surface. He couldn't be serious. He would struggle with all of his limbs. He couldn't imagine only using one. Without chakra, it was going to be even harder. When Naruto graduated from the academy, he was expecting to go much harder on his training than his sensei. He was hoping for some direction and a relatively neutral attitude. He knew he couldn't ask for more than that. He was fully prepared to push himself and train on his own terms. He had gotten the exact opposite. Guy pushed him further than Naruto had ever imagined for himself, and the jounin led by example. He was happy with the way it turned out. It was tough being Guy's apprentice, and he wouldn't have it any other way. He watched Guy turn to face the mountainside. He gripped a crevice and hauled himself up, crossing his legs and locking them into place while he placed one hand behind his back. Naruto stared with wide eyes as Guy continued his way up, only using one hand. The jounin appeared to be hopping between handholds, swinging to reach them and still grinning madly. Naruto placed his own hand on the mountain's surface, finding a firm handhold. He looked up and spotted the next one, jumping to grip it tightly. He hauled himself up and shoved his feet into the first crevices he could find. He let out a sigh. There was a long way to go. He took a deep breath in and looked up once again, careful beginning to make his way up. Determination fueled every step as he lost track of the world around him, his entire being focused on the next crevice, the next handhold. He could do this. If he wanted to get to the Sannin level someday, if he ever wanted to leave this village, he just had to complete every challenge set before him. He may get tired and fed up at times, but his burning desire to reach his goal kept him going longer after he should have stopped. He cursed as the moss on his current handhold gave way, and he dug his other hand more firmly into the rock face. He tried again and found a more secure lip. He moved his leg, yanking it out the crack in the rock to shove it into another one further up. His arms were starting to shake from the effort, and he was pretty sure he had damaged one of his toes from thrusting it into the rock face too quickly. The sweat dripped down his back as he hauled himself up, his muscles burning and his breathing speeding up. He finally reached up for the next hold and felt a flat, grassy surface. His head snapped up and he grinned victoriously as he pulled himself up. His upper body flopped onto the grass as his legs hung over the cliff edge. He rolled over so he was sitting up, panting harshly as he looked back down to see how far he had come. The trees they had come from looked like a speck in the distance. Well done, Naruto-kun. Guy stood next to him, looking unaffected by his own climb. You were much faster than I was on my first excursion up the mountain. Thank, Guy-sensei. Naruto smiled tiredly up at him. It is not only an excellent training exercise for discipline and physical conditioning, but I have always been fond of the view. Naruto joined him in looking out at the village below. It was picturesque, with the quiet village surrounded by trees rustling gently in the breeze. Birds flew overhead and the sunrise cast a warm glow over the colorful buildings. This view always reminds me of what I am fighting for, Guy said quietly, his grin much softer. Naruto frowned as he looked out at the village. He didn't think he was seeing the same thing Guy was. Up here, he could imagine that he was separate from those down below, that he was observing the sleeping village as an outsider. He decided that he liked it up here too. It did remind him of what he was fighting for. It wasn't Konoha. Genma rolled his senbon between his teeth as he leaned against the soft sofa behind him. It was a slow day and most of the jounin were out on missions. Reito had left yesterday. Irika was busy at the academy at this time of day, and Izumo and Kotetsu were bickering at the front gate the last he saw them. He wasn't required to be anywhere for the next 3 hours, so he was passing the time at the jounin standby station. It was better than being bored at home. Someone entered and Genma sat up with a grin. Ebisu, his former genin teammate, looked over at him, changing direction. You're not normally around at this time. I have just come from the Hokage's office, Ebisu said proudly, sitting across from Genma. He wants me to train his grandson. That's great. Genma started before a thought occurred to him. Isn't the kid only like 4? He won't be in the academy for years yet, never mind graduating. Ebisu scoffed. It is never too early to start training, Genma, he proclaimed. The honorable grandson represents not only the Hokage himself but Konoha. He must be trained in the correct etiquette and techniques worthy of a member of the Hokage's family. If you say so, Genma shrugged. Ebisu had always been a bit uptight. During their genin days, he couldn't count the number of times he and Guy got scolded by the other shinobi for improper conduct. Genma would always bring up Ebisu's conduct around the bathhouses. That quickly shut him up. Do you not have somewhere to be? Ebisu pushed his sunglasses a bit further up his nose. Mission, but that's not for 3 hours, Genma sighed dramatically. Everyone is either busy or on a mission. There wasn't even anyone at the bar last night. Usually I can count on Anko, but she's been busy with Ibiki in the T&I department. Genma, you are a jounin of Konoha, Ebisu said disapprovingly. You should really stop going to the bar every night. There are too many stories going around about your antics, and it's not fitting for a shinobi of Konoha. Genma waved a hand dismissively. If it's the one involving a cat and a melon, I spread that story myself. I refuse to let a feat like that go unnoticed. He could see Ebisu gearing up for one of his lectures when his other teammate entered the building. He tried to hide his sigh of relief at the distraction. Guy, over here. The elite jounin turned and smiled widely at the sight of them. My most youthful teammates, how are you on this most wonderful day? All the better for seeing you, Guy. Genma grinned, moving over to let his other teammates sit down. Where have you been? I haven't seen you at the mission assignment desk or challenging Kakashi around the village. My genin is keeping me busy, Guy laughed boisterously, patting Genma on the back. Genma just managed to save his senbon as he was jolted forward from the force. His youth and passion are unparalleled, and he encourages me to reach greater heights with my own training. You have a genin team? Ebisu spoke up, leaning forward intently. I have one genin, Guy answered. He is my apprentice. How'd you manage to only get one? Genma asked. Usually an apprenticeship happens after they make chunin or one genin in the team is apprenticed while the others still train with them. It's unusual for one genin to be apprenticed right off the bat. The last one was Kakashi, Ebisu nodded, when he was apprenticed to the yondaime before he got Obito and Rin. This is indeed a special case, Guy said at full volume. He will be specializing in taijutsu, and Hokage-sama decided that I was the best to teach him. I have no doubts he will one day surpass me if his youth continues to bloom so brightly. Who is it? Guy-sensei. Genma watched the QB container trek into the station, mud trailing behind him and a deep scowl on his face. A black sleeveless shirt was tucked into slim black trousers, ending in white bandage that went into the top of his black shinobi sandals. His black fingerless gloves went into black bracers that went all the way up to his elbow. A sleeveless hoodie that was more brown than orange at this point hung loosely around him. His blonde, spiky hair hung slightly into his eyes and the whisker marks were as obvious as ever. He couldn't spot his Hitai 8. He had nothing against the kid. He knew the yondaime's sealing work better than that. It saddened him to see how the village treated the kid. He tried to make sure Uzumaki would at least be safe. Any drunkards at the bar who even suggested physical violence against the Uzumaki got a fist in their face. He couldn't really do more than that. He hadn't actually seen the kid in a while. Talk of the Uzumaki had really died down over the past 2 months. He watched Ebisu's feathers ruffle and braced himself for the tirade. "You should not be in here," he huffed, standing and folding his arms. "Genin and Chunin are barred entry from this building. Only Jounin may enter the Jounin standby station. You must remove yourself at once." Before Guy could speak up, Uzumaki retaliated first. "I'm just here to see Guy-sensei," he glared. "What was I supposed to do? Just yell outside for him? You would have told me off for doing that too." Genma had to agree. Ebisu would have gone out to reprimand him if he had done that. Ebisu blustered, shoving his sunglasses harshly up his nose in annoyance. "That is no way to speak to your superior." "Good thing you aren't my superior then." Uzumaki rolled his eyes before he turned to look at Guy. "I can't make it to training tomorrow morning. My landlady is trying to kick me out again, and being homeless doesn't agree with me. I need to go to the office first thing to sort it all out. I'll meet you at the desk at the usual time for the D-ranks." Genma couldn't hold in his chuckle at Ebisu's face. He had never really bothered with formalities like Ebisu did. It was concerning that Uzumaki was having issues with his accommodation. He was, what, 9? Was he living alone? Guy threw the genin 2 thumbs up and allowed confirmation, but Genma knew him better than that. He was worried too. Uzumaki threw a sarcastic salute at Ebisu and sauntered back out the station, still trailing mud behind him. Ebisu was almost purple in the face by this point, and he whirled around to face Guy. "You need to control him," Ebisu demanded. "That boy is insubordinate and a liability. He should never have graduated." "Wow, hey, there's no need for that," Genma interjected. "Sure, he's a bit rebellious, but I'm sure he's a good shinobi." "He's a worthless nuisance," Ebisu exploded. "At the academy, all he did was sleep or play pranks or skip entirely. He had openly stated disdain for the people of Konoha, and his dislike of teamwork is well known. He isn't worthy of that Hitai 8. That is not for you to decide." Genma and Ebisu looked over at Guy, and Genma gulped at the look on his face. There weren't many times that Genma had seen Guy angry. He could probably count them on one hand. The Jounin was happy and boisterous and always looked on the bright side. He had been the same as a Genin and a Chunin. That made the times where Guy was truly furious even worse. "I will not sit here and listen to you slander my student," Guy said as he rose from his seat. "Naruto-kun is the most hardworking and earnest genin I have ever had the pleasure of teaching. He has good reason for being the way he is, and attitudes like that are what is hindering him from reaching the prime of his youth. The next time I see you will be for an apology to Naruto-kun." Guy stomped out of the Jounin standby station, the young Jounin entering scrambling out of the way. Silence hung over the room for a long moment. Who the fuck pissed off Guy? Genma looked pointedly at Ebisu as the man stared after their genin teammate, the shock and indignation still clear across his face. He himself also stood and followed in the direction of Guy. He needed to get out of there. Genma had a feeling that this wouldn't be the last time Guy and Ebisu would clash over Uzumaki. Naruto stomped away from the office, unable to feel any satisfaction from his victory. He wasn't being kicked out, and he'd even managed to get his hot water finally fixed, but dealing with her always left a bad taste in his mouth. She couldn't raise the rent on him as it was the orphan fund paying for it until recently. She knew that he would report her in a heartbeat to the Hokage if she tried anything, but it didn't stop her from trying to make him miserable. He had lost the hot water 5 months ago, and she wouldn't replace the fridge that had broken due to its sheer age. He felt bad, but he had stolen one from the old Uchiha compound. They were all dead and wouldn't need it anymore. He felt slightly ill at the thought of stealing from a dead clan, but that was outweighed by his desire to keep his milk and vegetables from expiring early. He couldn't afford more than one shop a week, and he needed everything he bought to keep as long as possible. He couldn't afford to buy even a second-hand one. He shot a burning glare at some woman who was staring at him, and she actually flinched, her head snapping round to look back at the vegetables on the nearby stand. He sighed heavily and cast his eyes up, trying to find the best route to escape to the rooftops. His gaze was brought back down by the sounds of murmuring. It wasn't even about him this time. He watched Uchiha Sasuke walk up the street, his shoulders hunched and hands shoved into his pockets. The villagers around them whispered to one another, and Naruto was pretty sure he could spot at least 3 girls their age following him. He was the only other kid that was talked about as much as Naruto was, although it was in a very different tone of voice. Naruto was spoken about with disgust, hatred, or indifference. Sasuke with reverence, excitement, or pity. It was pretty obvious that Sasuke didn't like it and Naruto couldn't blame him. He was only a topic of discussion because his whole family had been killed by his brother. Naruto didn't know what that was like, but he imagined it sucked, especially being reminded of it every day. He didn't know what it was like to have a family, people he could fall back on and depend on for support, but to be left completely alone in this world wasn't a nice feeling. He knew that at least. He looked between the rooftop and the Uchiha, hesitating. He didn't know the other kid anything and he would probably just get yelled at for getting involved. But as he watched the Uchiha sink into himself further with each word from the villagers, his decision was made. He walked forward, holding his head height and meeting each person's gaze with a defiant glare. Sasuke looked up at his approach, his delicate features set in a deep scowl. The kid was pale with dark eyes and Naruto thought his hair kind of looked like the tail of a duck. "If you want to get away from these assholes, come with me." Sasuke's scowl remained in place although Naruto could see the confusion in his eyes. "Who are you?" "I'm the only other person in Konoha talked about as much as you are." Naruto shrugged, feeling the glares around him intensify. "I hate listening to them too, so I take a route through the village they can't reach. I can show you, but it's a one-time offer." Sasuke looked around, noticing that many of his admirers had switched their attention to Naruto and not in a good way. He took a long moment to stare silently at Naruto. Naruto sighed, giving up and turning to leave. "Wait." He peered back over his shoulder. "Show me." Naruto waved him forward and walked to one of the side alleys. He stopped, a bit surprised to see Sasuke right behind him. "You'll need to get on my back." Sasuke crossed his arms, affronted. "Why would I do that?" Naruto rolled his eyes, placing a foot on the wall and taking a couple of steps. He looked back down at Sasuke, satisfied to see the Uchiha's scowl absent. He stared up at him with a slightly open mouth and Naruto grinned at him. "Unless the academy is different from what I remember, you don't know how to walk up walls yet." Sasuke seemed to catch himself and his frown returned. Naruto held out a hand and Sasuke reached out reluctantly. He pulled the other boy up and onto his back, shocked at how easy it was. Maybe all those early morning physical conditioning sessions were actually paying off. He walked steadily up the wall and climbed over the lip of the building, dumping Sasuke down the moment they hit the flat surface. "I'm late for something, so I'll leave you to make your own way. Just don't fall." They would have my ass if they knew I brought an academy student up here. "Aren't you an academy student?" asked Sasuke. "You can't be older than me." "I'm probably younger," Naruto shrugged. "I have a late birthday." "That doesn't answer my question." "I guess it doesn't, huh?" Naruto prepared to jump to the next roof, but Sasuke spoke up again. "Why did you do this?" Naruto paused. "I know what it's like. Not the losing your family part. I've never had one to lose, but the rumors and whispering behind your back. It sucks and now you've got no one to have your back." He backtracked quickly as he realized what he said. "Not that I have your back. This is a one-time thing, understand? You've got to figure things out on your own." "I don't need anyone's help," Sasuke scoffed, rolling his own eyes. "Good," Naruto nodded, "because no one is going to give it. Not without wanting something in return. You're on your own in Konoha. So what do you want?" Naruto opened his mouth but then closed it. He didn't want anything, but that completely contradicted what he had just said. Shit, he had to think of something. "I want you to never mention this again," he blurted out. He leapt to the next rooftop, not daring to look back as he made his way to the mission assignment desk to meet up with Guy. He didn't need to help Sasuke. It's just he understood what it was like. He wanted nothing more than to escape when he was in Sasuke's position. He didn't want to be forced to listen to people talk about him, no matter what was being said. He also still felt guilty about the fridge. That's all it was. Guy watched Naruto argue with the merchant, waving around the shopping list and baring his teeth. He always struggled on the shopping ranks. Guy knew he hated them more than even the babysitting missions. It was part of the reason Guy still gave them to his genin. It would be good for Naruto to grow and learn from these interactions with the villagers. He had noticed the genin using the rooftops more and more, and he couldn't recall the last time he had seen him in the village outside of these missions. It was not healthy for Naruto to completely withdraw from the village. He understood there were difficulties, but the only way for the villagers to learn what a hardworking and wonderful genin he is was to show them. Hopefully Naruto could also learn from the experience. That he could get along with the villagers. There were reasons to stay. I don't remember struggling this much with D-ranks. Guy turned to greet his rival, but Kakashi slapped a hand over his mouth. We don't want to disturb little Naruto. He seems like he needs to concentrate right now. Guy nodded behind his friend's hand and Kakashi slowly lifted it. Guy beamed brightly at him before turning back to continue watching his genin. The argument was getting more heated. Guy could see Naruto's hand twitching towards his kunai pouch, but he was proud to see he was resisting. He remembered their talk about not pulling weapons on civilians. Indeed, Guy replied, making sure to keep his voice quiet. The bloom of his youth is apparent more than ever, but the villagers continue to be blind to it. There is hope though. This is the longest he has spoken to a civilian in 2 months. He missed Kakashi's incredulous look. I don't know if that's a good thing, Guy. It doesn't seem like it's going well. It is still better than his avoidance, Guy said firmly. At least he is communicating. This will open up the possibility for positive interactions along with the negative. He stubbornly kept his grin on his face as he watched his student grab the bag of rice and shove the yen into the chest of the civilian, almost causing the man to lose his balance. The merchant screamed obscenities at his student as Naruto hauled the bag over his shoulder, throwing a middle finger behind him. He could feel Kakashi's stare. This is still an improvement, he insisted. His first week he stole the items and dropped the money on the ground in front of them. This time he spoke to the seller directly. His youth blooms more beautifully every day. Soon the village shall see it too. Your optimism is as stubborn as ever. Guy began walking, following his student at a distance. Most did not think he had the capacity to pass through the village unnoticed, but when occasion called, he was willing to dim his youth if only briefly. It was a necessary sacrifice so he could support his student. How's it going with him with everything else? Kakashi shoved his hands in his pocket as he fell in step next to him. I only see him once a week or so for his dojutsu training. He is making great progress towards the springtime of his youth. Guy began, his voice rising until he noticed Naruto looking around. A bit quieter, he continued. His taijutsu improves every day and he pushes himself to the limit every morning during his physical conditioning. He has been resistant to ninjutsu since he taught himself the water clone technique, but he has learned the required E-rank jutsu. He's very particular, isn't he? Kakashi watched the genin stomp through the village. I don't know many genin that could manage Mizu Bunshin in less than 2 weeks, much less on their own. Yet despite his obvious ability and capacity to be a ninjutsu expert, he shows no interest and prefers punching a wooden post for hours. He focuses when it interests him, but if it does not actively avoids it, Guy agreed. It is an attitude that we are working on. Naruto-kun does listen to me more than he did when he first became my student, Guy said proudly. Are you making any progress on the teamwork thing? Guy paused. I'll take your silence as a no, said Kakashi, amused. Next time I want to shut you up, I'll bring it up again. It'll be a very convenient way for me to avoid your challenges. While he trusts me and listens to my training suggestions, I have not been able to make any headway with his reluctance to work with his fellow comrades. It is a difficult mindset to break. Kakashi actually stopped, staring at him. Guy turned with a raised eyebrow, wondering what his rival was thinking. There was a strange look in his eye. I don't think I've ever heard you doubt yourself before, he said slowly, or be even vaguely negative at all. It's not like you. I am not being negative. Guy dismissed him, turning round to continue following after his student. It is not a youthful mentality to have. I also do not have doubts. Naruto-kun is a shining example of the best Konoha has to offer, and I am very lucky to be his sensei. Kakashi watched after him, that strange look still present in his gaze. Sure, Guy. His rival fell back into step and they walked along in silence for a few minutes. Guy took a moment to think on Kakashi's words. Was he acting differently? He had to admit that taking on a student was a bit different to what he had imagined when he had signed up for it back in December. He was grateful for Naruto and he truly believed that the genin was improving in most areas. He would proudly proclaim to the entire village that he was Naruto-sensei. He just didn't know how to mend the rift between Naruto and the rest of the village. His student's upbringing was a barrier that Guy had never encountered before. He loved the village and would do anything to protect it. His student was very much the opposite. He grinned brightly as Naruto spoke to the woman running the lychee stand civilly, procuring a bunch without raising his voice or physical aggression. Guy turned to beam at Kakashi pointedly. His rival looked away from him in response. His smile dimmed slightly as Naruto proceeded to pull a kunai on the next stall, his loud voice echoing over the village. There was still more work to be done. Naruto let out a deep breath, trying to calm himself down. Frustration did not help him with the tree-walking exercise. It would not help here. When Guy had suggested the next step in chakra control training, he had been eager to learn. The satisfaction he had from completing the tree-walking still lingered, and foolishly, he had thought that since he managed that one, the next one would be easier. 3 weeks and 3 damp sets of clothes later, he was ready to scream. He had taken to wearing shorts to training now, and paired with his usual black sleeveless shirt, it was much easier to rinse out his clothes now. He was still resentful of the fact that he hadn't really been dry since he had started learning the exercise. At least it wasn't winter. The heating in his apartment was bad enough without being soaked. The small lake beside the training ground was still cold on the best of days. "You are doing magnificently, Naruto-kun," he sighed, although a small smile did escape. He could always count on Guy-sensei for unwarranted praise. He hadn't done anything to earn it yet, but it was nice to have someone on his side. "I can only take 2 steps, Guy-sensei." Guy bounced up to him, his bowl cut flopping over his bushy eyebrows as he beamed widely, his white teeth sparkling. He was still wearing the tight green spandex and the orange leg warmers. Naruto would have thought he owned some sort of other clothes, but apparently not. His sensei was still trying to convince Naruto to wear his Heidi 8. He had taken to accidentally leaving it at home now to avoid the conversation. It sometimes made his D-ranks more difficult since the village didn't want to believe he was a qualified genin, but he had to pick his battles. "That is one more step than you were able to take yesterday." Guy laughed boisterously. His sensei hadn't decreased in volume either. Nothing about Guy had changed in the time he had been his sensei, but Naruto liked that about him. He was consistent, and Naruto was more willing to believe his earnestness this way. "I guess so," he reluctantly agreed. "Are you ready for your D-rank?" Naruto cursed silently. He would have said it out loud, but last time he had used that kind of language in front of Guy-sensei, he'd ended up with an hour-long lecture on the power of words and on how some would hamper his youth. It was just easier to say it out of his teacher's hearing range. "I may have forgotten I was doing one today," he sighed. He reached down to grab his sandals and reluctantly pulled them on along with his kunai pouch and hoodie. He hated putting his dry clothes over his soaked ones, but he didn't have time to dry out in the sun. Usually he would move on to physical conditioning straight after practicing water walking, and that dried him off. "We shall go to your apartment first, Naruto-kun," Guy announced, taking in his still dripping form. "It would not be youthful of me to allow my student to catch a cold." "I can't get colds, Guy-sensei." He was drowned out by the man herding him out of the training ground and towards the village. He managed to break out of the man's grip as they reached the first buildings, and he channeled chakra to his feet, running up the side. Landing on the roof, he waited for Guy-sensei to join him before he began to jump across the rooftops. He knew his sensei didn't like it when he used this route. He didn't think it was healthy for him to avoid the villagers. Guy meant well, but he didn't know what Naruto had been through. It was for the good of everyone that Naruto stayed away from them. He headed towards the most run-down area of the village. As much as Konoha wanted to believe otherwise, there were poorer and more dangerous areas that the lowest in the social ladder called their home, far away from the splendor of the clan compounds. He was considered below even these people, but it was the only place he could keep an apartment. It still wasn't easy, as his landlady occasionally tried to boot him out, but he had mastered the art of thwarting her. He came to his building and raised the window, deactivating the security seal on the frame. It was one of the most expensive things he had ever bought, but it was worth every yen. There weren't many civilians who tried his window, but he preferred to be safe. He climbed through and popped his head back out as he noticed Guy didn't follow him. "Do you not own a door, Naruto-kun?" "Not one that I use," he shrugged, ducking back in. He threw his hoodie on the bed as he listened to Guy enter his apartment. It was a good thing that he kept it reasonably clean. It's not as if there was enough room for anything else. Everything was in a single large room other than the tiny bathroom, the door of which was in the left wall. His front door was sealed shut with the wood and metal covering it, and there was a small fridge and limited number of kitchen counters on the wall beside it. He had a single couch shoved against the wall to the right of the window and a small coffee table that he also used to eat on sat in the middle of the space between the kitchen counters and sofa. His bed was pushed against the opposite wall and the bathroom door was at the end of it. The paint was chipping off the walls and there were chunks missing from the wooden floorboards. One of his cupboards was missing a door and the cardboard box he used as a wardrobe was getting to the point where he would need to replace it. Naruto knew it wasn't much, but he liked to think he'd managed to make it his own. Posters for ramen decorated the dull walls and his small supply of books and much more extensive supply of weapons had been stacked haphazardly against the far left corner, opposite the kitchen. He would have liked a bookcase or chest to keep them in, but they were expensive and it was working well enough as it was. He had plants of various sizes dotted around the room in no particular arrangement. He had just shoved them where they would fit. He had even found a circular, beige rug that he threw under the coffee table after cleaning it extensively. It was amazing what could be found in the right alleyways. "I'll be 2 seconds," he called to Guy as he grabbed some dry clothes and headed into the bathroom. He didn't listen to Guy's reply as he stripped, throwing the wet clothes into the bath. He pulled on the dry clothes and opened the door, pulling on his spare orange hoodie as he re-entered the main room. Guy was looking around his apartment with a frown and Naruto sighed. At the noise, Guy looked over at him and suddenly beamed. "Thank you for bringing me here, Naruto-kun," he boomed. "Your home is full of the same youthful spirit that you yourself exhibit. The plants are wonderful." Trust Guy to try and highlight the positives. "I must ask why you have bolted your door in such a manner," he continued. "It's safer," he shrugged, trying to be as casual as possible. "It's a rough neighborhood. I don't have much they can steal, but I've been collecting those weapons for a while. I don't want to have to start again." While that was true, Naruto did not mention the more pertinent reason. Disgruntled villagers couldn't take revenge on the Kyuubi brat if they couldn't reach the Kyuubi brat. "How are people meant to visit you if the door is barred?" Guy asked, and Naruto chuckled to himself. It was nice that Guy was always looking for the best in him, even if he had a habit of disappointing the man. "I don't get visitors, Guy-sensei." He was still smiling slightly. "You're the first person I've ever had in this apartment." It didn't bother him. Naruto had never wanted anyone to visit his apartment before. He tried hard enough to avoid people outside his home. Bringing them here would defeat the purpose. Guy smiled brightly at him. "I am honored, Naruto-kun." "What's the D rank, Guy-sensei?" Naruto changed the subject before his teacher could try making a big thing out of nothing. He was his sensei. It was kind of inevitable that he would come here eventually. "Do you have your height 8 on you?" Naruto blinked at the question. "Why?" "You will need it for this mission." Naruto stared up at the building in fury, vowing to do something horrible to Guy the first chance he got. He knew Guy liked to give him the missions he knew Naruto would hate in order for Naruto to grow and learn from the experience. This was taking it a step too far. The academy loomed over him, mocking his promise to never set foot on the premises again. He remained in place, as if the mission would go away if he waited long enough. He had to collect each Academy Chunint's annual report on the curriculum and bring it back to the administrative offices for them to process. He had been told that it was to see how effective the courses were in creating decent shinobi, but Naruto was suspicious. The curriculum hadn't changed in the slightest in the time he was there, and he could have written a book about everything wrong with it. He hadn't been there very long in fairness, but his point stood. He took a deep breath and stepped over the threshold. He wasn't a student anymore. Once he collected these papers, he could leave and go hit a wooden post for the rest of the day to relieve the stress of being back here. Guy couldn't stop him either, not after doing this to him. He made his way down the corridor, popping his head into the first classroom he saw. A sea of faces only slightly younger than him turned to stare. The woman at the front of the class turned her stern gaze onto him. "I'm here to collect your annual report," he explained shortly, bristling under the attention. "Where's your height 8? He sighed as he pulled it out, cursing Guy once again. The man had known. The woman scanned the piece of metal before thrusting the pages into his hand, slamming the door shut behind him. He had to repeat this process with every single Chunin he spoke to. The annoyance just continued to build with every interaction. They all knew he graduated. He hadn't exactly been invisible when he was a student here, and between the altercations with the other students and his status, he knew these people knew who he was. They had to have known he graduated. Hideki-sensei had barely looked at him when he turned up at his classroom. He came to the final door and he slammed it open. He was done with being polite and respectful. He wanted to leave and never come back. If Guy ever gave him another mission like this one, he would tell his teacher to shove it. There was a bad memory around every corner, and every sensei reminded him of the days where he was helpless to defend himself. He hadn't realized just how spoiled he was with Guy until he came back here and was reminded of how much worse his life had been. "That is no way to enter a classroom," the sensei exclaimed, "especially when arriving late." Naruto eyed the man. Brown hair pulled up into a spiky hairstyle similar to the Nara and a long horizontal scar across his nose. He seemed a bit younger than the other teachers. His warm brown eyes were annoyed but not malicious. "I'm not late," Naruto huffed. "I'm not a student. I'm just here to get your annual report." He held out his Hitai 8, already anticipating resistance. The man scanned the object before his eyes were drawn back to Naruto's face. Naruto could pinpoint the exact moment the man realized who he was because he actually took a step back, his eyes widening. Naruto rolled his eyes as he looked over to the students. They all looked back to him with varying levels of confusion. He was about to look away when he caught the gaze of the Uchiha. He prayed that he would keep his mouth shut. It was hoping for too much. "You!" The boy stood, pointing at him. A pink-haired girl looked back and forth between him and Sasuke with a scowl. "How do you know Sasuke-kun?" she demanded. "I don't." Naruto shot back quickly. "Who even are you?" The platinum blonde next to her raised an eyebrow. "Why aren't you in our class?" Naruto shook the Heidi 8 in her direction, mentally urging the teacher to hurry up with the report. The man had been spurred into action by his students' voices, and he was rummaging around his desk, throwing Naruto nervous glances the entire time. "That doesn't tell us who you are," the blonde said haughtily. "That's not my problem." He internally cried out in victory as he snatched the papers out of the teacher's hand and left, abandoning the door as he walked quickly to the exit. He never wanted to do this again. Sasuke heaved himself onto the rooftop, checking to see if anyone had spotted him. He'd been climbing up every chance he could get to find that blonde boy again. He had to use his hands unlike the other boy who had managed to walk up it, but he was getting faster every time. He needed to find that guy and get him to teach him how to do that. He had to get strong, and the other kids at the academy were only holding him back. He was reluctant to even ask this boy, but he also wasn't dumb enough to turn down an opportunity to get stronger. If only he could find him. All he knew was that he was a shinobi. He didn't know his name, and judging from his answers in the classroom, being vague and unhelpful with his answers was a theme with him. He shouldn't be hard to find. How many other kids were there with whisker marks on their cheeks and an orange hoodie? Irika-sensei had acted like he had no idea who the other boy was when Sasuke had asked him after class, but he had seen the man's reaction to the blonde. There was something his teacher wasn't telling him. He looked around the deserted rooftop and picked a direction to run in. He leapt across the gap between the buildings and rolled to break the fall. He rose to his feet and prepared himself to repeat the process. A voice stopped him. "What are you doing up here?" He snapped his head towards the voice to see the blonde standing on the rooftop he had just jumped from, with an eyebrow raised and his arms crossed. "You know the ANBU will personally shove you off the roof if they catch you," the boy continued before he paused. "Or maybe that was just me." "What's your name?" Sasuke demanded before he had a chance to leave. The blonde just looked at him. "Why do you want to know?" Sasuke gritted his teeth in frustration and took a running leap back across. He stood and faced the shorter boy. "It's not a hard question." "Naruto," the other boy offered. "Are we done here?" "I want you to teach me how to walk up walls," Sasuke said firmly, holding the boy's blue gaze. "No fucking way." Sasuke jolted in surprise as the boy turned to leave. He grabbed onto his sleeve but was shaken off as Naruto flinched. "I need to get stronger," Sasuke growled, trying to get his point across. "And I need 1,000,000 yen and a painkiller that works on me, but we can't always have what we want," Naruto shot back. "Then fight me," Sasuke yelled hotly. "If I win, you teach me that technique." Naruto just shot him an incredulous look that only served to make Sasuke angrier. "I can't fight you. Do you know how much trouble I would be in for that? You're an academy student." "Are you looking down on me?" Sasuke hissed, his fist trembling. He was taken aback for a second at the confused look Naruto was sporting. "I can't look down on you," he said slowly, a stark contrast to the fury bubbling up within Sasuke. "You're taller than me." Sasuke almost hit him, but he refrained. He didn't remember the last time someone had managed to get under his skin like this, and the worst part was that he wasn't even trying. No one at the academy was worth thinking about, and yet when he found someone that he could use, he wasn't interested. The blonde didn't understand. Sasuke needed to get stronger. "You have to teach me," Sasuke said intently. "I don't have to do shit." Naruto frowned back at him. "I don't owe you anything, and just telling me I have to teach you is not a way to get on my good side." "You're strong," Sasuke insisted, trying to make him understand. "Well, duh." Naruto rolled his eyes. "Now I'm going to leave and you are going to forget I ever existed. Okay? Last thing I need is the last Uchiha following me around." Sasuke hated that name. He heard it in whispers around the village. All it did was remind him of what he had lost. He wasn't even the last Uchiha. His brother was still out there, and while one day he would be the last Uchiha after he killed Itachi, hearing it now just made him think of how far he had to go. "Hey, I'm sorry." His eyes darted back to the blonde. "You apparently don't like that name, so I won't use it again. Seriously though, leave me alone." He watched the blonde leave and didn't attempt to follow. He did this last time. Acted cold and vague, and then turned round and did something considerate for no apparent reason. No one else had bothered to notice how much he hated that name, yet the blonde had actually apologized for using it. No one had ever done that before. It strengthened Sasuke's resolve to get the other boy to fight. He would just have to find a reason to convince Naruto. He would start by finding as much information as he could on the genin. Naruto activated his bloodline limit, staring intently at the form of Kakashi in front of him. The jounin began to move. Naruto focused on his minute muscle contractions and followed the almost imperceptible beat of his arteries. The world around him faded away until all he could see was what lay beneath Kakashi's skin and tiny, undisputable movements that rippled down the jounin's arms. "Rock!" Kakashi completed the action and was holding out a curled fist. "You're getting the hang of this," I smiled. "Is predicting your moves in Jankenpa really the best way for me to improve my bloodline limit?" Naruto asked dubiously. "One of the Emperor's Eye's best attributes is the ability to discern the smallest details in a person's movement," Kakashi responded. "Breathing, heartbeat, muscle contractions, sweat. You can see it all, and that means you can predict the enemy's movement perfectly. Your timing will mean you will always have the advantage. You just need to hone it. What better way to do that than Jankenpa? And it's not so we can just sit here instead of working on using it with taijutsu?" Kakashi waved a hand dismissively. "We'll build our way up to taijutsu." Naruto rolled his eyes. While Kakashi did seem to know what he was talking about and he was getting better at predicting the jounin's movements, he could be very blasé about things. Naruto was just as likely to find him reading his orange book in a random tree as he was to find him waiting in the right training ground. It was a stark contrast to Guy's way of teaching, but Naruto found that he liked it that way. The mix of the two teaching styles made sure that he didn't get too used to one way of learning, even if he spent the most time with Guy. He needed some time away from Guy anyway. The D-ranks were getting unbearable, and despite the fact he knew Guy meant well, it felt like he was being punished for the villagers' behavior. Like it was up to him to fix their horrible opinions of him despite the fact he had done nothing to earn them. He didn't want anything to do with them, and he knew the feeling was mutual. He just didn't know how to make Guy see it. The man was so joyful and optimistic, and he loved Konoha. Naruto didn't know if it was even possible for the man to understand where he was coming from. "A Rio for your thoughts?" Naruto looked up from where his gaze had dropped to the grass beneath them. He opened his mouth but quickly closed it again. Kakashi was Guy's friend first, his teacher second. He probably wouldn't appreciate Naruto's thoughts on Guy's current teaching methods. "D-ranks getting you down, huh?" Naruto snapped wide eyes towards the jounin. He couldn't see much beneath the mask and the tilted headband, but his gray eye was soft with understanding. "I get it," Kakashi began, looking up at the overcast sky. "I wasn't exactly popular with the village myself when I was younger. I was already a chunin by then, but I hated doing missions in the village. My sensei tried exactly the same tactics as Guy did, and it didn't work." "When did the village change their minds about you?" "When I fought in the Third Shinobi War." Kakashi's posture sank slightly. "I think it mostly had to do with people forgetting my father existed, though." "Did people hate you because of your dad?" Naruto asked hesitantly. "Pretty much," Kakashi shrugged. He screwed up a mission that cost a lot of lives, and when he died, I had to shoulder the burden since he wasn't around to do it. That sucks, Naruto muttered in understanding. Yep, Kakashi said, his countenance abruptly switching to cheerfulness. But it did get better. You know that guy just wants the best for you, right? He means well. I know, Naruto reluctantly admitted. It doesn't make the missions any easier. Have you thought about talking to him? Explaining how you feel and what you think would be the best way forward? It's hard to talk to Guy, Naruto admitted, constantly monitoring the Jounin for signs of retaliation against the negative comments about his friend. There was nothing, so Naruto continued hesitantly. He's so happy and enthusiastic, and he just loves this village so much. I don't want to be the one to upset him, especially for something I know he can't understand. He's so positive it feels like there's no room for negativity. Even if that negativity would be better for all those involved. Kakashi nodded knowingly. You know, Guy might understand better than you think. Naruto tilted his head in confusion. Guy's father, Dai, was known as the Eternal Genin. Guy used to get into all sorts of fights trying to defend him from what the villagers were saying. The approach he's trying with you is one he was taught by his father. He just hasn't realized that it won't work with you. Naruto sat back in his place on the grass. It was hard to imagine Guy as a kid, picking fights with villagers. He would have thought the man would have just yelled at them about youth, or tried to show them the folly of their ways through a dramatic reenactment or something. Maybe I'll talk to him, he reluctantly agreed, although he still had doubts about how effective it would be. Kakashi ruffled his hair and Naruto squawked indignantly, swatting away the offending limb. They didn't notice the rustle of the nearby bushes as someone turned and walked away, his green spandex standing out against the dull background. Guy sat in his chair outside the Hokage's office, his leg bouncing erratically as he frowned in thought. He missed the strange looks thrown at him from passing shinobi, a somber air surrounding him. The nearby guards kept glancing at him. They were almost confused by his uncharacteristic behavior. Guy was oblivious to all this as he continued to think deeply about what he'd overheard in the training ground. He had gone to meet up with the pair, maybe surprise Kakashi into taking up a challenge, but he couldn't bring himself to speak to them right now. Not with what he'd heard. Was he really failing so badly as a Jounin sensei? That his only student felt like he couldn't talk to him? That he felt like he had no say in his training? He knew that the boy was having trouble with the villagers, but he'd been blind to the extent. Was he just making everything worse for his pupil? Guy! He looked up into the expressionless mask of the ANBU guard. The man had obviously been repeating his name. How had Guy not heard him? Hokage-sama is ready for you. Guy nodded and silently made his way into the office, bowing low in greeting to the village leader. The Hokage looked back at him with warm eyes, but the smile dropped off his face as Guy continued to be quiet. Is everything okay, Guy-kun? Yes, Hokage-sama. Guy shook himself. It's something I need to work on myself. The Hokage considered him for a long moment. If you say so, he allowed. You may begin your report on your student. Guy gathered himself and stood straight. Naruto is continuing to improve immensely with his taijutsu and overall physical conditioning. His chakra control also continues to improve daily, and he proves less resistant to learning ninjutsu, although he only prefers the ones that can cause extensive damage. His dojutsu is developing under the guidance of Kakashi, and he handles tasks with a determination and integrity that magnificently showcases his blossoming youth. The Sandaime nodded along to his words as Guy continued in a serious tone. Genjutsu is still a struggle, and his mindset is much the same as it was when he graduated 7 months ago. He had accepted Kakashi's and my guidance, but he continues to isolate himself from the village and his peers. His attitude towards the villagers on D ranks still requires much improvement, but... Guy stopped, thinking back to what he'd overheard. But that is not necessarily Naruto-kun's fault. I have been trying to help Naruto-kun's relationship with the village by showing them how hardworking and earnest Naruto-kun is, but I do not believe this is working. They are not willing to engage with him, so I believe his D ranks are ending up more of a punishment than a benefit. The Hokage sat back in his chair, his hand clasped together as he looked back at Guy thoughtfully. Guy waited for his leader's verdict. He had not been able to see how much his student was suffering. He was a failure as a Jounin sensei. So why not use D ranks as punishment? Guy's head snapped up. Hokage-sama. You can stop putting him on regular D ranks, the man elaborated. He's ready for something like guard duty, which involves no interaction with civilians, and while he will be working with other shinobi, I believe this is unavoidable. We'll keep him on guard duty until we move him on to C ranks. Guy's brow furrowed as he considered the Hokage's words. However, Naruto is still prone to acting in ways that are not acceptable for a shinobi, the Sandaime continued. So if he does things like openly threatening civilians or pranking his comrades or such, then assign him a D rank. It will give him incentive to behave himself. D ranks as a punishment, but intentionally? That had never even occurred to Guy. The moment he'd found out how much those missions were hurting his student, he decided to stop them entirely and find an alternative. Hokage-sama, he's young but he is still a shinobi of Konoha. It may be detrimental to treat him like a child being grounded for bad behavior. Naruto-kun has always been a unique case. The Hokage shook his head. He hadn't had parents or guardians to shape his sense of right and wrong, and his academy teachers punished him for doing both. Naruto will break the rules as he does not see them as applying to him, but we need to teach him otherwise. Before he breaks a law he cannot come back from. Behavior like this was ignorable when he was an academy student, but I cannot ignore complaints from my shinobi. Guy wanted to argue that this was still technically special treatment, but he kept his mouth shut. No other genin was being assigned D ranks as a method of discipline, but Guy knew something had to change. He could not keep failing his apprentice. Yes, Hokage-sama. He bowed low, his mind swirling. He needed to speak to his pupil. Naruto grinned evilly as he watched the ANBU land on the roof. He and Kuma had had a particularly contentious relationship in the past, and he could not think of a better test subject to try out his new traps on. He figured that if it worked on an ANBU, then anyone ranked jounin and below would fall for it. That was the excuse if he got caught anyway. He hadn't forgotten how Kuma had thrown him off the roof and into a dumpster when he was an academy student. Twice. He loosened his grip on the wires, but before he could spring his trap, a hand came out of nowhere to grab them out of his hand. He looked back at Guy sheepishly, scratching the back of his neck nervously. "Hi, Guy-sensei," he said. "I was just trying out some new traps, and I thought if they would work on an ANBU, they'd work on anyone, and—" "Naruto-kun, you cannot prank the ANBU." They had drawn the attention of Kuma, and Naruto glared at the bear mask. He would get him back one day. The man vanished from the rooftop, and Naruto was forced to dismantle his beautiful network of wires. He genuinely felt sad about it too. It was some of his best work yet. Enemy Nin wouldn't stand a chance. He finished up only for Guy to order him to follow him. He walked behind his teacher, a bit confused. What was he going to do? They finally reached a training ground and Naruto stopped, his guard up and hackles raised. He did not like this. Guy was better than the rest of the adults that Naruto had encountered in his life, but he was still an adult. He could turn on Naruto at any time. A part of him didn't want to believe it. It had been months since he'd been assigned to Guy, and he felt like he could trust the man. With the way he was acting now, Naruto wasn't so sure. The jounin stopped in the middle of the training ground, and Naruto halted a few steps away from him. Guy turned, and Naruto didn't have the chance to spiral further as Guy bowed so low his forehead slammed into the ground. "I am so sorry, Naruto-kun. I have failed you as your sensei and have been blind to your struggles. I swear on the power of youth that I will be better and support my precious pupil to the best of my abilities." Naruto opened his mouth. He then closed it. He had no words. This hadn't been what he'd been expecting. Guy lifted his head back up, and Naruto's eyes widened at the bright red patch beneath the man's bangs. There was no reason for him to go that far. What? That was all he was able to manage right now. He'd never had someone apologize to him before. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do in this situation. "Naruto-kun, I apologize for forcing D ranks upon you." Guy continued a bit quieter. "I did not understand your aversion, and was under the impression that the villagers would warm up to you through exposure to your brilliant youth. I wanted to show the village how wonderful you are. You are hardworking and earnest, and I could not ask for a better pupil. I now realize that I am in fact making things worse, and I hope you can forgive my foolishness." He'd been planning on bringing up the D rank issue with his sensei, but he hadn't expected the man to get to it first. "Thanks, Guy-sensei," he said faintly, still in shock from the whole conversation. "Are you all right, Naruto-kun?" Guy frowned. "I understand if you need time to find forgiveness." "No," Naruto blurted out before wincing. "No, Guy-sensei, I really appreciate it. No one's ever apologized to me before, so it means a lot. He tilted his head in confusion at Guy's horrified expression. So I don't have to do D-ranks anymore? He changed the subject to try and get that look off of Guy's face. He didn't know why the man was reacting like that, but he didn't like it. Guy was supposed to be happy and smiling and yelling dumb stuff about youth. Guy appeared to shake himself out of it and grinned, his white teeth sparkling in the afternoon sun. Not quite, Naruto-kun. We will cease doing D-ranks regularly and Hokage-sama has assigned us to guard duty instead. You will need to work with fellow comrades, but it will keep you away from the village populace. We will also start C-rank soon, which will take us out of the village. You have trained hard and earned trust in your capabilities. Naruto felt a grin spread across his own face. He could leave the village soon. Sure, under supervision and probably not for very long, but it was something. Guard duty didn't sound too bad either. Anything was better than D-ranks. Guy's wording caught his attention before he could get too swept up in the excitement. What do you mean, not quite? Naruto-kun, you were attempting to prank an ANBU. Guy raised one bushy brow at him. That is not youthful behavior for a genin of Konoha. You will be assigned D-ranks as punishment for behavior like that, so you must cease your pranks and antagonist behavior when possible. That didn't sound like Guy's idea. He knew the man better than that. Whose idea was that? Hokage-sama's. Naruto scowled. This had Gigi's fingers all over it. He loved the man, but he had very particular ideas about Naruto's behavior and how it should be addressed. He was probably thinking the threat of D-ranks would force Naruto to try and get along with his peers and villagers. Naruto had no desire to get along with anyone, and everyone he pranked deserved it. He avoided everyone as a general rule anyway, so hopefully it would be a non-issue. We will go and get a D-rank, but unless you act unyouthfully in the future, this should be your last. Guy threw him a thumbs up. Naruto shoved his hands into his pockets but allowed the jounin a small smile. It probably wouldn't be his last since he wasn't about to roll over and take the village's abuse when it inevitably came back to haunt him, but the fact he wouldn't be subjected to them daily did raise his spirits. Guy really was one of the good ones. Shikamaru stomped away from his house, grumbling beneath his breath as he hunched his shoulders. Troublesome woman. His mother hadn't stopped nagging him about his latest scores at the academy, and he couldn't take it anymore. He just wanted to nap in peace. She was now tearing into his father, claiming that they were too much alike and that his father needed to set a better example for him. It was all such a drag. It was the early evening, so there were still clouds in the sky, so Shikamaru had decided to go look at them instead. His favorite spot was just outside the Nara forest where they kept the deer, and he knew there wouldn't be anyone around at this time. What was so bad about being mediocre? He would pass with middling scores and get placed on a decent team and eventually settle down with a family. He just wanted a normal, easy life. Aiming high and trying hard was just so much trouble. They couldn't all be the jounin commander. He came to the small hill and flopped down, resting his hands behind his head as he watched the red and gold-lined clouds float away from the sunset. His thoughts began to empty and he relaxed, melting entirely into the soft grass beneath him. This is what he wanted. Peace and quiet and nothing in his head other than the sight of gently floating clouds. Come on, don't do this to me. Shikamaru frowned as an unfamiliar voice cut through the quiet evening air. That didn't sound like any of his clan, but they were the only ones allowed this close to the deer. He reluctantly hauled himself upright to see a boy around his age trying to unsuccessfully herd 3 fawns back towards the tree line. The kid was blonde, with short spiky hair, and he didn't look tall. He was probably shorter than Shikamaru. He wore black shinobi trousers tied with bandages at the bottom above his black sandals and a sleeveless black shirt. Black fingerless gloves and black bracers to his elbow covered his thin, defined arms, and a loose sleeveless orange hoodie was wrapped around his waist. He had 3 whisker marks on each cheek and they jogged Shikamaru's memory. This was the kid who came to their classroom a month or 2 ago. He'd been told off by Irika-sensei but had then presented a Hitai 8. So he was a genin? He didn't see the rest of his team and he'd been alone when he'd come to the academy. The boy hadn't exactly seemed pleased to be there, and he hadn't answered Ino's questions, which had driven the girl nuts. Come on, little fawns, go back to the trees, the boy begged. You're the last ones and I want to go home. Shikamaru watched him struggle for a long moment before he heaved a heavy sigh, rising to his feet. Wary blue eyes flickered over to him. Dear rank. The genin didn't answer as one of the fawns came over to nibble on Shikamaru's shirt, He brushed a hand over its soft coat. You and Nara? Yes. Shikamaru frowned at him. Why do you have a D rank with the deer? The boy grumbled something beneath his breath that Shikamaru didn't catch, but he spoke the next few words a bit louder. I have to get the herd within the pen at the bottom of this field, he answered carefully. Apparently they're being checked over by the vet first thing tomorrow. Shikamaru nodded as he stroked the fawn. That made sense. They checked over the herd's health every few months or so. He hadn't realized that time had come around so soon. If you're a genin, where's the rest of your team? He asked curiously. I don't have a team, the boy answered shortly. I'm an apprentice. Shikamaru had heard of those, but they weren't common. He hadn't known genin could become apprentices. As far as he knew, they all had to spend time on a genin team first. He didn't know what this guy had done to avoid that, but it wasn't really any of Shikamaru's business anyway. It would be too troublesome. He'd leave all the information gathering and gossip to Ino. Do you want some help? He offered reluctantly. He didn't particularly want to walk around chasing deer, but it would be easier with him there. He was a Nara. The deer listened to his clan. The sooner this genin finished with his D rank, the sooner Shikamaru could get back to his hill and his clouds. He just wanted some quiet, and he wouldn't get that until this boy left. I don't need help, the boy snapped. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow as one of the fawns around the genin escaped his grasp and trotted over to Shikamaru. Blue eyes narrowed as the genin appeared to consider his choices. Fucking fine, but I don't owe you shit, he finally grumbled. Shikamaru rolled his eyes as he walked to the genin, the two fawns walking in his wake. He ran a hand through the third fawn's fur, and it turned to push its head into Shikamaru's hand. He rubbed the fawn between the eyes for a short moment. How do you do that? The genin spoke up again. Why do they listen to you? They're Nara deer, Shikamaru explained as he began to walk beside the tree line, the fawns in his wake. My clan has always had a connection with them. They don't like outsiders much. I could have told you that, the genin griped. This kid could rival Sasuke in the grumpy and unapproachable department. Shikamaru didn't speak to the Uchiha, but he'd observed his behavior in class. Although Shikamaru couldn't really blame him. If he had that many girls screaming into his ear every day, he was pretty sure he wouldn't act any better. He didn't know why this genin was so hostile, but it was really none of Shikamaru's business. Do I at least get a name? He drawled as he followed the tree line, the wooden pen appearing in the near distance. I'm Nara Shikamaru. The boy was silent for a long moment before he muttered, Naruto. Shikamaru nodded as he continued to lead the fawns to their destination. He opened the gate and ushered the fawns in, their mothers coming to greet them. He closed it and turned to Naruto. I'll see you around then. Naruto shrugged and began to walk off. He paused mid-step and hunched his shoulders. Thanks, he said, the word sounding like it pained him to say. He continued to walk away and Shikamaru watched him go. He hadn't seen him around the village other than that time in the academy. He wondered who his Jounin sensei was. He abruptly shook those thoughts off. He didn't need to know. It was too much of a drag to be curious about someone that obviously did not want anything to do with him. He started to trek back to his cloud-watching spot, banishing thoughts about the genin. He had his own problems to deal with right now. His mother would notice he was missing soon. Today we are going to learn ninjutsu. Naruto huffed, rolling his eyes. This is bullying, he said without heat. You and Gai-sensei are ganging up on me. I don't think trying to teach you techniques that will make you a stronger and more effective shinobi counts as bullying. Kakashi smiled, long used to Naruto's opinions on the topic. Yeah. Naruto waved off his words. He stretched his arms over his head, feeling the pleasant pulling on his back muscles. Things had gotten much better since he'd been switched to guard duty with Gai-sensei. They'd kept most of their already established routine, although they'd had to switch things around a bit, depending on the time of the shifts. They still started at 5 in the morning unless they had night shift, and Guy made sure they fit physical conditioning, chakra control, and weapon handling into their day somewhere. He'd been talking about ninjutsu since Naruto first started learning chakra control, and he should have known better than to think Gai-sensei would give up on something. Naruto knew they had a point about the whole thing, but he just didn't feel as involved with the fight when using techniques. There was a lack of accomplishment and satisfaction to watch the opponent fall from some flood or a ball of earth. I think Doton would slow you down. Kakashi drew his attention back to him. Suiton depends too much on a water supply and futon is the most difficult if there is no affinity for it. Keton or Raiton then? Naruto perked up a bit. I vote for Keton. He just looked innocently back at Kakashi as the Jounin scrutinized him. He knows that he'd been pretty resistant to this, but the thought of setting fire to stuff made him smile in a way he hadn't expected. It'd be probably best if he didn't give that as a reason to Gai-sensei and Kakashi though. Keton it is then, Kakashi nodded, planting his feet firmly to face Naruto and motioning for him to do the same. Naruto faced the Jounin and watched him with determined eyes. Snake, ram, monkey, tiger, dragon, ox, dog, dragon. Kakashi ran through the seals slowly and Naruto copied him. I want you to keep going through those without chakra until you can do it without thinking. What's the point of practicing without chakra? Naruto asked as he ran through the seals again to commit them to memory. What's the point of learning the jutsu if you're too slow to use it in a fight? Kakashi countered and Naruto grumbled to himself. The man had a point. Hand seals weren't his strong point and it would take time for him to get used to them. This jutsu is called Katon. Injiki and it'll coat your fists in fire, Kakashi continued. It'll cover your opponent in fire if you land a hit, but if you mess up the seals, that flame will be turned towards you. Fine, you've made your point, Naruto admitted. I'll practice. You're such a good little genin. Kakashi stepped forward and ruffled his hair. Naruto whacked his hand away and sent him a warning look. He liked Kakashi, but it was a matter of principle. He continued to run through the seals, pointedly ignoring Kakashi's dark eye observing him. So I've heard a little rumor going around the village. Naruto rolled his eyes but continued to remain silent. The last Uchiha has been asking around about you, Kakashi said, amused. Did you make a friend? Naruto resisted the instinct to tell the Jounin not to use that title. He could still remember how Sasuke had flinched when he'd said it to his face, and although he was not trying to do anyone any favors, Naruto wasn't that fond of some of his own titles that the village had bestowed upon him. However, that would give Kakashi the wrong idea. He'd been managing to avoid the academy students since their last meeting on the rooftop, and he would not have Kakashi's tendency to metal break that streak. I've never heard of him. He looked up and met Kakashi's eye, refusing to blink or twitch. Kakashi watched him, tilting his head. Really? The Jounin asked, not even trying to conceal the amusement in his tone. You haven't heard of the only other kid in the village as infamous as you? Nope. Naruto looked back down at his hands as he ran through the seals once again. He didn't need friends, no matter how much the adults in his life liked to tell him otherwise. I'm going to try it out, he announced suddenly, hoping Kakashi would take the bait and quite bugging him about this. Katon Injiki. His fists lit up in a burst of flames and he grinned. Okay, so maybe when Gai-sensei brought up learning more ninjutsu in the future, he wouldn't be so quick to argue. He waved his hands around a bit, watching the orange flames trail after them. Punching someone in the face was going to be so much more effective this way. Naruto, what did I just say about practicing? Kakashi's exasperated voice broke Naruto out of his fascination. I did practice and now I'm doing it, he grinned cheekily. He heard Kakashi's quiet sigh and his grin widened. He may like the Jounin, but it wasn't going to stop him from annoying the hell out of the man. It didn't work on Gai-sensei. The man was way too cheerful and dense to appreciate Naruto's wit. He had to keep someone on their toes. Guy knocked on the window of his student's apartment, sliding it open a second later. He hopped into the room, dumping his full backpack onto the worn wooden floor. Good morning, Naruto-kun. A groan emerged from the lump on the bed. A blonde head popped out of the mess of orange blankets, blue eyes blearily glaring at him. What the fuck, Gai-sensei? His student swore, his voice thick with sleep. Now, Naruto-kun. There is no need for such unyouthful words on this bright and wonderful morning. Guy grinned, which only prompted another groan from his student. Gai-sensei. Naruto finally emerged, sitting up to stare deadpan at Guy. We finished a 12-hour patrol. He paused to grab the old alarm clock sitting on the floor next to the bed. 3 hours and 47 minutes ago. We are supposed to be meeting in. Naruto's face scrunched as he ran the numbers. His student's mathematical ability tended to suffer in the mornings. It was only in times like this where Guy could actually see how young his student really was, before he had a chance to put on his mask for the village. He was so mature and serious with a dry wit beyond his years. Guy admired that in his student, it was so much like his rival, but a part of him didn't like that he'd been forced to grow up so quickly. Guy was here for him, though. He would help his student reconnect with his youth so he could live as bright and happy as Guy knew he could. Naruto was in the springtime of his youth, and it was Guy's job to make sure that he blossomed into the best version of himself. 7 hours and 13 minutes. Why are you here? Guy excitedly grabbed his bag from the floor and moved it onto the coffee table. It's your birthday, Naruto-kun. I could not wait to give you your gift. Something other than tired annoyance broke through his student's expression, and Guy saw a hint of surprise before it was quickly covered up. You got me something? He asked, swinging his bare feet off the bed. Of course. Guy grinned as Naruto finally stood, his loose orange shirt hanging over his loose black shorts. It is not every year that you turn 10. Your birthday deserves to be celebrated. Naruto walked over slowly, peering down at the green bag suspiciously. The bag is for you too, Guy told him brightly, bouncing in place as he stopped himself from shoving the bag towards him. I noticed that yours sustained some damage on our last mission. The rest of your gift is inside. A small smile appeared on Naruto's face as he carefully opened the flap on the bag. He reached in and lifted one of the weights out, examining it curiously. Weights. There is a variety, and I will go through each of them with you. Guy gushed excitedly. Some of them you will need to grow into, as we do not want to stunt your growth by going too heavy too soon, but you can apply them to your physical conditioning and your taijutsu. It will improve your speed immensely and add power to your attacks, which are the areas we are focusing on. Naruto turned over the wrist weights in his hands, his expression the most unguarded that Guy had ever seen. Thanks, Guy-sensei, he said quietly. I've never had a present before. I mean, Tsuchijizan gives me free ramen, but he does that when it's not my birthday. Guy's grin dropped slightly at the admission, but he quickly gathered himself. Well, Naruto-kun, you will have to get used to it as my student. Naruto reverently placed the weight back in the bag, closing it over delicately. I also came to tell you to take the rest of the day off. Guy continued brightly. You should enjoy your birthday. There should be a lot for you to do with the festival on. Naruto's demeanor quickly dropped at his words. I'd rather just train, Guy-sensei. Nonsense, Naruto-kun. You should explore the springtime of your youth and partake in the festivities. Naruto crossed his arms, looking away from Guy. I don't go to the festival, he said shortly. Guy wanted to push his student, but in the 10 months since the young blonde had become his apprentice, he had learned to recognize certain cues. Kakashi would say that Guy had finally learned some restraint, but Guy knew Naruto was not like other genin. He needed patience, and while even Guy would admit it was not his strong suit, he had to be better for Naruto's sake. Taking on a student had changed Guy more than he thought it ever would, and through his mistakes, he'd learned that sometimes taking a step back was the best decision to support his student. However much it made him uncomfortable with how much he wanted to do the opposite. I will see you at the training ground at the appointed time then. He threw thumbs up at his student, smiling brightly. If you bring the blue weights, we can get started on your new taijutsu training. Naruto nodded gratefully, and Guy clambered back out the window, waving energetically before making his way to the ground. He had not made much progress in getting his student to unbolt his front door, but he felt that they were still taking steps forward. They were smaller than he imagined when he had first been assigned Naruto as an apprentice, but forward nonetheless. His student would be flourishing in his youth soon enough, and Guy was excited to go on that journey with him. In the meantime, he should find Kakashi and see if his rival was up for a challenge. Naruto hefted the wooden cabinet further up into his arms to prevent it slipping. The festival had finally ended in the early hours of the morning, so he'd taken the opportunity to go shopping, while the streets were mostly empty. By shopping, he meant dumpster diving and scavenging perfectly good pieces of furniture people were stupidly throwing away. Most of the villagers were still hung over, so they wouldn't be awake to bother him for another couple of hours. Guy had surprised him. He'd never expected a present from his teacher. No one ever got him gifts. He hadn't even known that's what it was until Guy had said it. It made him feel warm in a way he'd never quite felt before, and he didn't know what to do with that feeling. He'd managed to avoid thinking too deeply about it by throwing himself wholeheartedly into his new weight training, but the warmth crept up on him every time he looked at the collection of shiny weights sitting neatly in the corner of his room. And now he had a place to store them, Someone had thrown away an oak cabinet and Naruto hadn't hesitated to start dragging it home. It had 5 shelves and stood just a bit taller than Naruto himself. 2 of the shelves were a bit wonky and he was pretty sure it was supposed to have doors, but it was good enough for him. He could even fit his clothes on one of the shelves with his weapons and weights occupying the rest. The only issue had been taking it back to his apartment. He'd done enough physical conditioning with Guy for the weight of the thing to not be a problem, but it was the size that was causing Naruto some trouble. He knew he was pretty short for his age and the cabinet was taller than him and wider than his wingspan. It had taken some adjusting and he'd had to forego the rooftops, but he was almost there. "Do you need any help?" Naruto scowled as he continued walking. People were supposed to be asleep, not out here bothering him. "Here, I can help." Naruto was forced to stop as a boy stepped in front of him. He placed the cabinet on the ground as he glared at the obstacle in his path. He was taller than Naruto by a fair bit, with long black hair tied back into a braid. A short tan kimono was wrapped around him and round. Dark eyes looked back at him eagerly. He couldn't have been much older than Naruto and he could see signs of training. An academy student then. "No," he said shortly, hoping the boy would pick up the hint. "Oh." His expression dropped a bit. Naruto took that as his cue to leave and grabbed the cabinet. He didn't even have the chance to pick it up when a chunk of wood fell off, causing him to lose his grip on the whole thing. It clattered to the ground and dislodged the 2 dodgy shelves. Naruto had to take a minute to breathe. Yelling swears might wake the rest of the village up. "Are you sure you don't need help? Shouldn't you be training or something rather than hanging about here bothering me?" he snapped. The boy actually took a step back before he looked away. "I'm not going to pass anyway," he said quietly, and Naruto rolled his eyes. "That sounds like a you problem," he retorted. "Go and train or something instead of moping about it." "You don't understand," the boy cried. "I can't use chakra. I'll never pass the exam." Naruto resisted the urge to facepalm. "You were never going to pass anyway with that shitty attitude," he snapped, patience wearing thin. "The only thing stopping you from passing is you, so you need to take your finger out of your ass and figure it out. So what if you don't have chakra? That ain't no reason to give up. Learn weapons or taijutsu or something that doesn't use chakra. Fuck sake." He scooped up the fallen pieces of wood and grabbed the cabinet with his other arm. Annoyance and the urge to get far, far away from this moping idiot fueling his strength. Naruto had to work 3 times harder than everyone else, but he did it. He graduated and showed everyone who didn't think he could do it where to shove it. This boy probably didn't even having people trying to sabotage him, and he wanted to complain about how hard it was. He stomped down the street, completely missing the way the other boy's eyes followed him with wonder. Sasuke sat in the training ground, legs crossed and chin propped up on one hand. He was supposed to be training, but the puzzle that was one Uzumaki Naruto was occupying too much of his thoughts for him to concentrate. He hadn't anticipated much resistance when he'd started his investigation. Since he'd lost his family, everyone in the village had fallen over themselves to offer what empty promises and pointless assistance they thought would get them into his good books. He'd never accepted any of it. None of it would change what happened, and Sasuke knew that they didn't really do it for him. Anyone who would have survived Itachi would have probably gotten the same treatment. No one cared about Sasuke. They only cared about the Uchiha. That was why it had been almost refreshing to encounter someone like Naruto. He looked at him and saw Sasuke. It was infuriating in equal measures as the other boy refused to take him seriously. Naruto had a way of getting under his skin in a way no one else in the village had, and they'd only met a few times. They would probably end up fighting when Sasuke tracked him down again, but that only made him want to find him faster. No one brushed off Sasuke. So he'd begun his quest to find out more about the blonde, and had almost immediately encountered a wall. No one would talk, and Sasuke knew for a damn fact that they knew what he was talking about. It was like no one wanted to acknowledge Naruto existed, but Sasuke had seen the way they would talk about him when they thought he had left the vicinity. They knew who Naruto was, and what's more, they hated him. Sasuke had then started just eavesdropping, since asking them directly was getting him nowhere. Demon was the most common insult, although Sasuke heard plenty more. The venom with which the villagers talked about the boy was startling, and yet not a single one had outright said the reason why they all hated him. He'd found out about some of the pranks the blonde had played, but that shouldn't have been enough to prompt this level of anger. The shinobi population were a lot more ambivalent, but Sasuke suspected they knew he was there, so who knows what they actually thought. He had managed to find out that he was apprenticed to some jounin named Mado Guy. Sasuke had never heard of him, but he did know how weird it was for a newly graduated genin to get apprenticed rather than put into the usual team of 3. The genin from his graduating class were more than happy to tell Sasuke about how Naruto had been the dead last and terrible at anything chakra-related. When he'd pressed to find out how he'd passed, they'd suddenly clammed up. Apparently saying anything remotely positive about Naruto was too much for them to handle. Sasuke scoffed and rose to his feet, brushing off his pants. He'd only managed to find more questions than answers about the genin. He understood the comment he'd made about knowing what it was like to be gossiped about a lot better, but Sasuke still didn't know why the village talked about Naruto like that. He couldn't think of anything Naruto could do to make a whole village turn against him so strongly. It didn't seem fair. He still wanted to fight the other boy. Whatever the villager wanted to think wasn't Sasuke's problem. Someone who graduated early was exactly the sort of rival Sasuke needed to get stronger. Itachi was still out there, and he was only falling further behind. The academy didn't challenge him, but he knew Naruto would. He had one mission in life, and that was to kill his brother. He didn't care what it took to get there. He would find Naruto again and make him fight so Sasuke could get stronger. He had to get stronger.